If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
What is something paranormal, demonic, or terrifying that you swear you saw, but no one believes you?
My grandfather's paranormal experience he swears by. When my grandfather was young, he helped his father with his line of work. He often worked in the woods, whether it be helping cut down trees or gather wood. This particular day they went to this secluded town. When they got there, my grandfather wanted to go explore the woods while his father worked. He was warned to not wander off too deep into these woods because they're known to be dangerous. However, that's what he did. He ended up getting really lost because he wandered off too far in. And he stumbled upon a body of water. Now this is where it gets weird. When he told me what occurred, I could see the absolute fear in his eyes. He told me a creature, one that was tall and dark, walked out of the swamp. It resembled a woman and had very long hair covering much of her distorted face. She also had a very dark complexion. It walked out of the swamp and gripped his neck and started to choke him, then it started to drag him into the water and drown him. He was freaking out and begging it to let him go. Eventually it did. By the time it let him go, he was hysterical, crying and screaming. It was also nearing dark, and somehow his father found him but was confused why his son was wet. When they went back to the town, he explained to the people who were working with his father what had occurred, and they said that they knew of that creature. A lot of people end up wandering far into those woods and dying. They die because that thing drowns them, and my grandfather was very lucky he was spared. Now I know this story might be difficult to believe, but that's fine. I believe it because in the look in my grandfather's eyes, you could see the fear. He's a very honest man as well, never lying. This all occurred in Morocco back in the 60s, in the north of the country. Ghost Kid. When I was growing up, my dad lived in a house that was built in the early 1900s. I had tons of paranormal experiences in this house, but this one freaked me out the most because it was the only time I had physically seen something in the house. I was about 14 years old. My dad and his girlfriend had just switched the house from cable TV to Fire Sticks, and I didn't have one in my room yet, so I would watch TV in my little brother's room when he wasn't in there. This night he was sleeping downstairs in his grandma's room. He was 4, so I was in his room watching TV when suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a black figure about the height of my brother standing in the doorway. Thinking it's him, I say, "His name, why are you awake right now?" And as I go to look towards the door, the figure quickly turns and runs down the stairs. I hear the sound of the running. Thinking he was just playing around, I look at my phone and see it's 1 a.m., so I decide to go to bed. I shut off his TV and lights and head back to my room. As I walk into my room, I hear soft footsteps creeping back up the stairs, so I turn towards the stairs, still in my room, and watch as the figure peers around the wall towards me. As I see it, it quickly jumps back and goes running back down the stairs. This time, I hear faint child laughter. I'm still thinking it's my brother. I go downstairs to get him to bed. When I get downstairs and go to the room he's supposed to be in, he's sound asleep in the bed. It's at that point that I hear the faint laughter in the kitchen near the stairs to the basement. Deciding I wasn't going to check it out because at this point I'm scared, I go back up to my room. I plugged in my phone and lay down in my bed, and then when I looked up, I saw the same black figure I had seen the other 2 times peer into my room at me. I quickly turned my bedside lamp on, and as I did, it ran back down the stairs laughing. I shut my door and slept with my lamp on that night. My dad no longer lives in that house, but to this day both my dad and my stepmom don't believe me when I tell them that story. They push it off as my imagination even though my stepmom and her mom both experienced things in that house with me. Something was watching me through the mirror. So a few months ago, I moved into a new apartment and was trying to furnish the place on a budget. I went to this local thrift store and picked up a big old mirror, heavy frame, a little chipped on the corner, but it looked cool and was only $20. I hung it up in my bedroom. First couple of nights? Nothing weird. But then I started noticing this blur. Like, in the reflection, in the corner of the mirror behind me, it looked like there was something there. Not a shape or a person exactly, just movement. But when I turned around, there was nothing in the room. I figured it was bad lighting or my eyes messing with me when I was half asleep. Then one night I got up to grab water around 2 a.m. I walked past the mirror, and I swear I saw someone standing behind me in the reflection. The person, dressed in a tall, dark hoodie, was standing there without a face. I turned around, heart racing. Empty room. I didn't sleep that night. I moved the mirror to the living room the next day to clear my space. And after that? Nothing. No movement, no shadows. This continued until my friend arrived a week later. She sat on the couch, looked up at the mirror, and said, "That's a cool piece, it looks old. Did it come with the weird writing on the back?" I was like, "What writing?" We took it off the wall, flipped it over, and, in faint, scratched handwriting, it said, "Help me out. He's still inside." I sold it on Facebook Marketplace 2 days later. No regrets. I swear I've been haunted. This happened to me a few years ago, and before it starts, I want to give a warning. If you're spiritually aware, be careful. Whatever was following me is attracted to stories about it. For over a year, every time I told this story, I'd experience sightings for about a week afterward. Once, I shared this story with someone who could see spirit auras, and she saw the entity too. It'd be irresponsible for me not to start with that warning just in case, even if you think it's bullshit. Anyway, here we go. Yeah, I think I was haunted while I was in college. While I lived in a dorm, I was disabled. One night, I was in bed, and once I'm lying down, I can't get back up. Every light was off, and I was in complete darkness. Suddenly, my brain went into full combat mode, with every instinct telling me that there was something lurking in the doorway. So I turned my head, and sure enough there was a humanoid shadow there, darker than darkness, and after a few moments of pure panic it lurched towards me. I begged for my roommate to turn on the light, and once he did, it vanished, but it didn't leave. I'd frequently feel watched when I was alone or like something was right behind me when I was facing a wall. It even haunted my dreams for a bit, killing me and my family in vivid nightmares. My religious friends tried praying over me and my room. It didn't work. I tried praying too, nothing. Moved dorms? It followed. Eventually, it just left. Disappeared. I hope it's gone for good. Father-in-law's ghost story that he swears is true and is corroborated by others. Thought I'd share. For the sake of convenience and fluid readability, I'm going to retell my father-in-law's story in the first person, as he told it to me and my wife. It took place a few miles outside of the mid-sized town he was living in at the time. I don't remember the names of the roads. Here goes. Grandma and I were driving on County Road 14? At around 10 o'clock at night, on our way back from the casino. I was passing through an intersection when suddenly we both screamed and I slammed on the brakes. I didn't feel any impact, but we both immediately got out of the car and looked around. Grandma's crying hysterically and keeps asking, "Did you hit him?" There was a boy on a bike, no older than 10 years old, who came out of nowhere and rode right in front of the car. We were positive that we just T-boned this kid at 50 miles per hour. But there was nobody to be seen. It was like we drove through him. From the moment I hit the brakes and got out of the car, only about 5 seconds went by. I could see some rural houses down the road that intersected us, but nowhere the boy could have made it to in that short of time. I immediately drove up and down that intersecting road but still didn't see anything. I told the story to my neighbor/buddy Ron the next day. He nearly shit himself after he asked me if it was forgot, road and I said yes. I also got a little more freaked out due to the fact he seemed to know which intersection it was, even though there are several like it along that Maine County road. Then he told me about 6 years ago, at that same intersection, there was a boy who was riding his bike and got hit by a car. I thought he was playing a morbid prank, but he kept swearing he was telling the truth and that I could ask so-and-so about the accident. Shortly after my conversation with Ron, for some reason I decided to go back to that intersection. As soon as I got there, my heart stopped. I noticed a white cross staked into the ground beside a property fence, about 20 feet from where I thought I hit that kid. What am I dealing with? The kids both claim something is in our home. I have a serious question. I have a son who dealt with what he said was a ghost man who would walk down the hallway and open his closet door. He would then see the ghost lying down on a shelf. It got to the point that we were putting tape on doors to show that they weren't opening. This was in 2017. Well, now, last month, my 13-year-old daughter had a terrible nightmare about what she calls the robed man. She says he is about 7 feet tall, does not have eyeballs in his sockets, and opens his mouth to a low glowing color. She says he lay down with her and was rubbing all over her. Well, she has been having reoccurring dreams where he paralyzes her, and he walks throughout the house and rubs all of the other family. My dogs freak out in her room now and avoid it like the plague. Today my daughter made a comment that she hated this dream ghost, and a painting in our living room crashed across the living room while we were leaving for dinner. Now I don't really believe in ghosts, but it's getting pretty tense in the house now. My wife has complained of feeling like she is not alone during the day, and the other night, at bedtime, I swear I saw something walk through the kitchen. The dogs freaked out in the kitchen, but my security camera did not show anything. What should I look into? I opened a sealed door in my new house. And now weird things won't stop happening. Did I mess up? So, last month I moved into a super old farmhouse, the kind that feels like it has 100 stories tucked into its walls. The realtor was upfront about it being quirky but nothing serious. Everything was fine. Until I noticed something strange. There was a narrow door upstairs between 2 bedrooms, completely sealed shut and painted over like someone really didn't want anyone opening it. Naturally, curiosity got the better of me, rookie mistake, I know, and I broke it open. Behind it? A staircase. Leading down. The depth of the passage is greater than that of the house's basement. No light, freezing cold air, and this weird old mirror at the bottom. I didn't think much of it at the time, figured it was some abandoned storage space. Since that night, I have continued to hear knocking from that stairwell. I found footprints, bare, human-sized, in the dust outside the door. My cat refuses to go upstairs anymore. Last night, I swear I saw a figure standing in my hallway. But when I turned on the light, it vanished. I don't know if I'm freaking myself out or if it's just the old house noises. Or if I really woke something up. People, any advice? Should I seal the door back up? Bless the house? Move? I'll share updates if anything else happens. I saw something on the side of the road. It was eating a dead dog or goat. I truly wish I took a picture to ensure that I am not making this up, but the bus immediately left. This is not fiction, I am not crazy, and I swear to God that I know what I saw, and it gave me nightmares. Instantly, this experience reverted me back to that little kid who was afraid of going out at night because of all the stories his family told him. Okay, allow me to explain. So, I'm a first-year college student, and every weekend I go home to my hometown, which is 2 hours away by bus from the city I attend university in, so that I can spend time with family and not get homesick. I spent the entire bus ride watching movies on my phone because I was bored. It was around 7 in the evening, if I remember correctly. I put my phone in my bag because it was around 15%, and I wanted to preserve the power. The bus was already halfway to my home, according to Google Maps. We were in a rural area. Mountains and a big forest are towards the right side of the bus, on the left are a few houses and more forest. The bus slowed down to the point of nearly stopping because a couple of vehicles were slowing down in front of us. I looked outside the window next to me, and that's where I saw it. I couldn't believe what I just ducking saw, and I wasn't the only one. The person sitting beside me also saw it. On the side of the road, underneath the street light, we saw what looked like a naked person crawling on all fours eating what looked like a dead dog or goat. There was blood everywhere, it was eating it in a savage manner while dragging it to the woods. I immediately got out my phone to take a picture, but the bus was already speeding up, and I couldn't see it anymore. What on earth did we just see? It looked human. The scariest part is how much it looked like my grandmother's descriptions from her stories. Her skin was as black as coal. Wild, unkempt hair. She had eyes that glowed in the dark when exposed to light. I turned to the guy who was sitting beside me and told him never to speak of it ever again. What? Why? Every time I think back to it, I am reminded of the stories they used to tell us as kids. They would tell us stories from our folklore about man-eating evil monsters who hunted at night. We call them Aswang. Humans by day, but they hunt for children and pregnant women at night. They are shapeshifters, capable of transforming into animals to deceive people. Some steal corpses and replace them with banana stalks, while others have wings and fly atop roofs to use their long tongues to suck blood. I heard stories about this a lot because a lot of my older family have encountered these bastards before. With my grandma, it snuck inside their house during a power outage and tried to hurt my newborn aunt. She noticed it crawling on the ceiling and was taken aback. My grandpa got out his 1911, scaring it away, and my aunt, who lived in the mountains, said that one of them climbed on top of a roof. I saw it, I know I did. May 2018. I was 16 at the time. I was just chilling when I heard a voice from the attic, which is strange because the attic opening is on the second floor and I was on the first floor. I was home alone, so I felt chills rise from my spine. I got up and went upstairs to the attic. I don't know why, but I felt a presence. I kept looking around me to see if anyone was there. Hello? I yelled. But no answer. Yet. That's when I heard a loud bang from the kitchen. I didn't know if this was a prank, so I yelled, "Come out right now, or I will call 911. Usually my sister would come up behind me and scare the duck out of me. But no one was there. I went downstairs to investigate the noise. However, I found that nothing had fallen. What the hell? I thought. My family was taking my cat to the vet. So I went upstairs to the attic. But as I opened the attic, I swear on my ducking life, I saw a face peeping from the attic. I called 911 and hid in the downstairs bathroom, where I was armed with the biggest knife I could find. I heard someone running down the stairs. I continued to speak with the police over the phone. I hear banging on the bathroom door. I scream, "Help, someone is banging on the bathroom door, hurry." Eventually the banging stopped. The police arrived, and my family had also just arrived. I explained what happened to my family and to the police. They searched the house and found nothing, not even a trace of a human being. But I know I saw it. I knew I did. Growing up, my great-grandmother lived with my grandparents. She tragically died in a car accident at the age of 92 when I was 7 or 8. She died because she choked on something she was eating when the car wrecked. Talk about bad luck, she was in very good shape too. For a while after she died, I could still feel her around me in the house, and sometimes I would catch glimpses of her. Well, fast forward to after her funeral, and one night I woke up, and she was staring dead at me. I know this might sound fake, but I swear to God it happened, lol. Every night for a month after her funeral, I would wake up, and she would be there, not always staring, sometimes just sitting. She seemed lost and dazed. I was so scared to sleep that I stayed up all night with the TV on. My grandfather noticed this, her son, and he asked me about it. I explained to him, thinking he wouldn't believe me, but he told me that he had been seeing her too. We're Native American, so once my grandmother found out, she did a ritual to help my great-grandmother pass on. My grandfather always thought that she didn't realize she had died and got stuck and needed help moving on, and I believe that too. I've had other paranormal experiences because I grew up in rural Virginia, but that's the one that sticks out to me the most, as it was my first real encounter with ghosts/the afterlife. I saw myself standing in the tree line while driving home. What does this mean? Hi everyone, I really need some advice or insight on something that happened to me tonight. I live in a rural area in eastern Kentucky, and I was driving home after leaving my boyfriend's house. I was on a gravel road, just heading down the path back to my place. I was almost home when I saw myself standing in the tree line, about 10 to 15 feet away. It felt as if I were standing there, staring at myself. I swear it was me, same clothes, same everything. I don't know how to explain it, but I was immediately hit with this overwhelming sense of dread and pure fear. I've never felt anything like it before. I didn't stop, but I was shaking as I drove past. I had my small dog with me, and he saw and reacted to it as well. I don't know what it means or what I was seeing, and I'm freaking out about it. Has anyone experienced something like this before? What could it mean? I'm just really scared and would appreciate any help or advice. Thanks. What was she? So I, 20 female, and my cousin, 21 female, used to sneak out a lot at night when we were teenagers. We found it peaceful, and we would always walk to the McDonald's. She was living with me and my mom at the time. The McDonald's was about a 20 to 30 minute walk away. Well, one night we were walking back to my house as it was nearly 4 a.m., and we wanted to be home before my mother woke up, to avoid being caught. On the way back, we looked down a dark path, and at the end of it was something like a block of apartments, but in front of it was a lady. She was wearing all black, and she was just staring up at a cat. Now I must add that where we lived was known for substance usage, so we thought the woman was just high, but she turned to face us, and as she did, I remember the chill that ran down my spine. Something was not right with this woman. It was terrifying, so me and my cousin both ran, but no matter how fast we ran, the woman was not far behind us, which didn't make sense because she was only walking. We got a fair distance between us, and I looked back. All I saw was the woman staring at us. Her eyes were almost completely black, and I could swear she was smiling, but the sight of her sent chills, so we continued running until we reached the nearby Tesco, where other people were, and thereafter, we never saw her again. Even now, my cousin and I will talk about it. I saw a gnome-like creature about 2 years ago when I was living at my mom's house. Curious about it. I live in southern Illinois near Missouri, in a decently sized town. It's not a big city, but it's not rural or anything. I had just pulled up into the driveway, where I am now facing the backyard. It's got a white fence that you can clearly see through. It's more meant to just be a border than to have any privacy. Like 3 bushes along that fence, and then we had a back porch. Now I had just taken my glasses off to clean them with my shirt, but I was still looking ahead. The backyard is pretty, and we have a cherry blossom in the back that was finally showing for the little time it does in the year. Now I'm certainly not blind without my glasses, just don't ask me to read things far away. I was only about 10 feet away from the fence line in front of me when I saw it run from behind a bush under the back deck. It's way too small a space for a person to get under, and I know it well because my cat had gotten herself under there once, and it took me 2 hours to get her to come out. I ended up having to take some of the deck up. Anyways, it was a paler skinned creature, definitely human-like skin, no pointy hat or anything. I could tell it was wearing clothing, certainly. From my judgment it looked like a really small human male, properly proportioned to be that size, 2 feet and some inches tall. Hair on the head and, I swear, some facial hair. Anyways, it was most certainly on 2 legs, that's what threw me so hard, and I could never just brush it off fully. There's absolutely no way it didn't make a mad dash on 2 legs in a way no 4-legged creature would be able to, no matter how much it had trained to do so. I tried to look for it under the deck but couldn't see more than half of the space under the deck, if that. I could hear it panting/breathing heavily once again. In a way I wouldn't expect an animal to. I even tried talking to it/coaxing it out, but I felt crazy and was worried about the neighbors seeing me. I went inside and never saw anything like it again. I swear I saw the Easter Bunny when I was younger, and my friend I met later said he saw the same thing. So back when I was around 7 to 11 years old, I recall a very vivid memory of seeing what looked like a 6 to 7 feet Easter Bunny shadow thing that was completely still after getting up to go to the bathroom. At the time I assumed it was the Easter Bunny and wanted to help, but something told me to move on and go to my parents' room. This shadow creature was big. 6 to 7 feet while being hunched over and holding a basket, I assumed full of Easter eggs, but I couldn't tell, the entire entity was emitting no color. Fast forward to today, and my friend I met only 4 years ago starts talking about this experience he has with seeing the Easter Bunny with his sister, where it was a 6 to 7 feet bunny creature thing holding a basket standing completely still and down the hall when he was younger. I have never talked to him about this, and he asked his sister, she was also there, about it, and she described what he saw. For reference, he didn't message her specific details, just asked about if she recalls seeing the Easter Bunny. Has anyone else experienced something similar? I saw an old video from 6 years ago of someone talking about how they experienced the same situation when they were young. My dad yelled my name and turned out the lights. My dad's dead. It's a lot to write, so here's the exact text I sent my sister this morning explaining it to her. So since we moved in, things will always be in different places or, like, different positions. I have a box under my bed with pictures of dad in it and a few notebooks that somehow always manage to be pushed out from under my bed. I thought maybe it was Ebby, but it's pretty dense and happens every single day. I finally opened the box the night before last, and all the pictures were still together, except one was separate. It was the picture of me, you, and Dad at Six Flags. Noted that was weird. I was like, okay, that happened, and went to bed. Last night Josh and I were having a discussion, and it got heated about the day before and how we didn't go anywhere and blah blah blah, so I went to the bathroom, and I swear I heard Ash, which Josh never calls me, then a little louder, Ashley, and then when I ignored it that time, it was Ashley like it was in the room with me. I finally was like, what, Josh? Did you just yell at me? And he was like, no, he was sitting in the living room. I was in the bathroom. Sam, I swear to duck I heard Dad's voice. I've never cried so ducking hard. Then I told Josh that I heard Dad, and he was like, sometimes stress can cause audible hallucinations. The second he said this, the lights went out in our room, the living room, and the porch, but the bathroom, where I heard it, stayed on, as did the kitchen, where we weren't. Josh checked the breaker and found it untripped. He got scared and thought maybe someone was in the crawl space, but I know I heard Dad. Just to be certain, we called the police to search the house, they found nothing. This is my father's story. This is a story that my father has sworn to be legit. He is a very serious individual, so it seems out of character for him to lie about this. Back in the 1980s, my father, in Peru, was in his 20s and wanted to gain some quick cash one night. He decided to take a taxi that night. He picked up a man and a woman, and they told him to drop them at a certain desolate area. The man sat in the back, and the woman sat in the front. Once they arrived, the man took out a blade and placed it on the front of my dad's neck, while the woman told him to give all of his personal belongings, including the keys to the car, to them. My dad cut himself by pushing the knife away from him. He then punched the woman and got out of the car. He fell, and that's when, he swears by this, a man almost 7 feet in height asked him what was wrong and if he needed help. My dad told him what occurred. The man went over, and I don't recall if he either beat them up or they got scared since he was a tall and muscular man, but in the end they fled. My dad then got back in his car. The man who saved him came up to the driver's window and said, "Are you okay? Why would you be doing taxiing around these locations? Now go home." My dad turned to get the keys from his right pocket, getting ready to thank the man. When he looked back, the man was completely gone. There was no sign of him at all. He was in an area that was plain/flat. This meant that there were no buildings or other structures nearby, only the road. So this person should have been seen right away. My dad only turned away for a max of 3 seconds. This story sounds crazy, but he swears to its legitimacy and even gets shaky telling this story when he does. How do I get a spirit to stop following me? I would say this started when I was around 9. I started getting terrible nightmares every night and would wake up crying or sweating. I shared a room with my 2 sisters, and they asked me to talk to our dad about it. I did talk to our dad about it, and he admitted that it had happened to him too, but that I would eventually grow out of it. The same year, the faucets would turn on, we had a bathroom connected to our bedroom, clothes would fall off their hangers, our door would open and slam, and my friends, and sisters, would wake up with random bruises and scratch marks. It was terrifying. Plus, the nightmares never stopped. I had stayed up late watching YouTube when I was 13, and I had grown accustomed to the haunting shenanigans. When things happened, my sisters and I would just roll our eyes. I was facing the wall when I felt goosebumps and sensed eyes staring into the back of my head. Creepily enough, the first thing I thought of was, it finally decided to show itself. I turned around, and I swear, there was a shadow standing in front of our, open, bathroom door. I blinked, and the shadow vanished. I kept it a secret, as one of my sisters was paranoid and still terrified of the haunting. A year later, 14 years old, my other sister had moved out, so now it was just me and sister, in the room alone. We had stayed up, and I admitted to her what I had seen. As I was describing it, she interrupted me and detailed it. I asked how did you know? And she said she had seen it, except it was only staring at me every time she saw it. We both had quickly decided it was after me, for some god-awful reason. After this, I tried everything. I tried praying, using salt, good luck charms, spells, tarot, and everything else. After none of it worked, I gave up. Then we moved, and I got my room. The nightmares got worse, and the sleep paralysis started. Once a month, I get the most terrifying sleep paralysis to the point where it's messed up my sleep schedule. I see him in my sleep paralysis, he's there in my nightmares, and I see him sometimes when I'm awake, not very often. I tell all my friends that I'm used to it, it doesn't bother me, but yes, it does. I want a good night's sleep. I want normal dreams. I want to have sleepovers without my friends being terrified. Every time I see him, I am filled with dread. When I attempted to distance myself from him, the situation worsened, leading me to give up. I cried to my mom about it, and she said, "Ghosts aren't real. You'll grow out of it." It has been 9 years. I never grew out of it, it hasn't gotten worse or better. The issue remains unchanged. Please help me. What should I do? Am I crazy? Everyone keeps telling me I'm lying. One night I woke up and opened my eyes immediately, feeling like I was never asleep. I looked over to my door, which was wide open, it was always closed, and saw a figure standing there. I sit up and just stare in shock. She was leaning against my doorframe, her skin as pale as ever. Initially I thought it was Mum because she had the same dark hair as her, so I called out to her, "Mum? Mum?" But she just stood there blank. Still sitting up, I looked at her properly, noticing she was wearing a black bra and nothing else. As I looked down her body, it began to become more transparent until I reached her legs, which quite literally just blended into the surroundings behind her. At that moment, the realization dawned on me that this entity was a ghost, causing my heart to pound and my senses to perceive its presence. I lay down slowly. At the time, I had a standing fan at the corner of my bed, facing the same direction as this woman. As I lay down, my eyes passed through the fan blades, obstructing my line of sight to her. When I fully lay down, she basically evaporated, she just faded away into nothingness. I pulled the covers over my head until it was so hot I was sweating. I decided to run to my mom's room. I counted to 3, I then sprinted to my mom's room through the living room, dining room, and hallway. I crawled into her covers. I don't know if it was just my paranoia, but I swear I heard someone calling my name from the end of the hallway. What do you guys think? When I was around 10 years old, I was alone in a part of the schoolyard during the morning break. In the country I lived in back then, it was common for schools to have 2 breaks, a 30 to 45 minute long one in the morning and a 1 hour long one at lunchtime. There was a tall, huge tree there, and I was sitting on one of the large roots that stuck out of the ground when I heard someone approaching. I turned to see who it was, and I saw it was one of my friends. She said, "I bet you can't catch me." I told her I could do it, and we started running around the tree while I tried to reach her and catch her. We were both laughing, and she was right, she was too fast for me to reach her. Then, one of my classmates called my name. I stopped running and turned around, and the boy who called my name asked, "What are you doing running around the tree by yourself?" I was about to tell him I was not alone when I saw that my friend, who I thought was there with me just a few seconds ago, wasn't there. It was really strange. I just told the boy it wasn't important and I felt like doing it. Later that day, I saw my friend, and she came and said, "How have you been?" It was like she hadn't seen me that day. I didn't say anything about it or about what had happened earlier, but while we were talking, she mentioned that she had spent the break in her classroom, talking with some of her friends, and it was true. I asked one of the friends later. This made me think I was crazy or something, as it was impossible that she could be in two places at the same time. Several years have passed since that day, and I still can't find an explanation for what happened, and I have never told anyone about it. I saw her, but I don't know if it was supernatural, a glitch, or just my imagination. I would appreciate it if anyone could help me to understand what happened. The year was 2008. I moved into a new cottage-style house. 1.5 bedroom where the attic was gutted and turned into a room. I fell in love with the place and had to have it. The night I moved in, I was taking a shower when I heard an old woman call my name in a very creepy, very haggard, long, and drawn-out voice. Nobody was in the home with me. I lived by myself. I immediately get out of the shower, fully expecting someone to be in the home. I got dressed so fast and ran out of the house, terrified to return. I never heard anything again, but the upstairs room had such an ominous feeling to it. Like something evil was up there. When you close your eyes, you can feel something in front of your face. I was always afraid of what I would see if I opened my eyes, so I never did. I would see shadows on a daily basis. It was the longest year of my life. I couldn't wait for my lease to be up. Scary story. So this detail is important for this story. I'm deaf, I can speak and sign. Anyway, I grew up in a town where there were 2 major floods. The most severe one was in 1889, which my family survived. So of course, there are a lot of unexplained things happening. When I was 5 years old, I lived in an apartment complex, and my uncle lived above us. So I was in my room one night, I couldn't sleep, so I decided to get out of bed to play with Barbie. However, the Barbie pink car is not mechanical, with nothing but Barbie in the seat. To my surprise, the Barbie car began moving around my room on its own, eventually leaving my bedroom and entering the hall. I was confused but amazed. I followed the Barbie car, and the car stopped suddenly in the middle of where the hall meets the dining room. A black figure on the floor with red eyes caught my attention, and I was an extremely friendly child, so I waved and introduced myself. However, the figure slowly crawled toward me and started to lunge at me before disappearing, leaving a rotten smell in the hall. In the same apartment, I also caught sight of a spider girl. She was very young, wearing a ragged, faded white dress, and she was soaking wet. She would spend her time in my room, particularly when she wasn't on the floor. I would try to bribe her with Halloween candies to come down and play with me. I had a Barbie car and a swimming pool. So as we played, I told her that we should take the Barbie for a swim, and she completely freaked out and vanished. Later that night, the tall pink dresser, bolted to the wall, fell completely down and crushed the Barbie swimming pool. The reason for her name was because her arms and legs were in different directions and her skin was bluish white. My mom and her boyfriend came in as the dresser fell down. I didn't hear the crash, so my mom marked it down as faulty bolting. However, years later she would tell me that as she cleaned the dresser up, she heard a heavy sigh behind her, and she turned to look, and no one was there. The spider girl, however, became a large part of my childhood. Often during the nights, she would speak, meaning I could hear her inside my head. She's terrified of water, and honks, and I tried to explain that water won't hurt her. One statement that stuck in my brain to this day was, "Water killed me." So I told my mom about the spider girl, and she didn't believe it and dismissed it as an imaginary friend. However, one day I was in the living room watching a Disney movie while my mom was in the kitchen. Spider girl appears above the couch, saying, "Ask your mom about the flood." And so I did. My mom nearly dropped the plate as I asked her about it. The conversation goes like this. "Mom, the flood?" Me, "Yes. The spider girl wanted me to ask you about the flood." "Mom, there were 2 floods, but the one in 1889 was the worst." Me, "Bad? How?" "Mom, a water dam broke, and many people drowned. You will learn about this in 3rd or 4th grade." Me, "The spider girl is scared of water." As always, she ignored this, so she had to work a night shift and asked my cool uncle to babysit. So he was in the living room chilling on the couch, and I asked my uncle more about the flood. He would rather not say anything for fear of me getting scared and having nightmares. At that exact moment, Spider Girl appeared beside the armrest. My uncle's hair stood up, and he looked at me. "Is she here?" I nodded with a smile. "Yes, say hi, Spider Girl, and this is my uncle." That was the last time I saw him. A month later, he moved out. I was 13, and he asked me if I remembered Spider Girl, and I told him yes. He explained that our apartment house, before it was built, was a land where people would come after the flood to find or to bury their loved ones, and he's seen Spider Girl. After extensive research, he told me that a girl went missing during the flood or possibly died in the fire at the dam. To this day, I often see Spider Girl hanging around my room and in public, even after I moved to another state. Even some girls at my deaf school's dorm would often see her. This happened a couple of years ago, early 2019 if I remember right. I had a noise machine to help me sleep. I had it going and, for some reason, felt this intense sense of dread and terror like nothing I'd felt before. I'm talking about a pit in the stomach, the heart starting to go crazy, and adrenaline. I thought at the time I was having sleep paralysis because I've had a few experiences before with sleep paralysis, but I could move my body, so that rules it out. My eyes were closed tight because I didn't want to risk seeing whatever was making me feel this scared, but eventually I gave in and opened my eyes. Right at the foot of my bed there was this torso. It had no legs, no head, and no arms, it was just a torso. Just floating in the air. It sounds funny, TBH, thinking back on it, but I was absolutely terrified. I was calling for my mom, but she couldn't hear me over my noise machine. I felt for some reason it was mocking me, like I was trying to call for help but my mom couldn't hear me because of the noise machine, and I was just stuck. I couldn't move because I was afraid. I still don't think it was sleep paralysis because I could feel the difference between just not being able to move and not being able to move out of fear. My closet was open, very stupidly, and I don't know if this was me just imagining things, but I swear I could see this shriveled, creepy face peering out of my clothes at me, this long, spindly hand peering out from my clothes as well, holding it open a little. Looking up, there was some sort of thing looking down at me. I can't remember it for some reason, I just know it was watching me. It flickers between being this flat thing against the ceiling and some sort of small humanoid. My mom eventually heard me because at this point I was screaming for her to open the door. As soon as the light hit my room, everything just disappeared. I told her what happened, and she was concerned but at the same time was like, just go back to sleep. The weird thing was that usually I can chalk it up to it being some item or pile of clothes that is shaped like something else, and in the dark your mind will play tricks on you and make it look like something else. However, there was nothing that could have been mistaken for the torso shape. It was floating, with no poster to be found. Nothing. The closet thing didn't make sense because I could see my clothes moving. The ceiling thing didn't make sense either because there was nothing on my ceiling besides a fan. It could have been the fan, but where the thing wasn't near the fan. I've never thought to tell this because I had it out of my mind for a while, but I saw this channel's video and thought I'd talk about it to see what others think. I never told anyone what I saw that night. Maybe you will believe me. This is something that happened when I was about 12 years old. I don't usually talk about it because people either don't believe me or just don't care. But it's something that stuck with me for years. So, it was during summer break. My cousin was staying at my house because he had broken his knee and needed help getting around. He was a little older than me, but we were super close. We'd stay up all night playing video games, eating junk food, and just doing typical guy stuff. One night, I was in my room playing video games by myself. My cousin was in the living room. I'm not sure what he was doing, but I know we were the only ones home. It was getting late, and I was just about to shut everything down and go to sleep, when I saw something. Something started crawling toward me. It looked human, but not quite. It was all messed up, it was deformed. The way it moved didn't seem right at all. It made these weird noises I can't even describe. At first, I thought it was my cousin playing some kind of sick prank. Until I remembered, his leg was broken. He couldn't crawl like that even if he wanted to. That's when I absolutely lost it. I ran out of that room so fast, I didn't even look back. I told my cousin what I saw. He didn't really believe me, but I could tell he was creeped out too. After that, I refused to sleep in my room for at least a week. I crashed on the couch in the living room and kept the lights on. I ended up living in that house for another 6 years. Nothing quite like that ever happened again, but that room never felt right. I always had this weird, heavy feeling when I was in there, like I was being watched. I don't know what I saw that night, and I honestly don't care if people believe me or not. I know what I experienced. And to this day, I still get chills thinking about it. I've moved since then, but every now and then, I get scared that something like that might happen again. Has anyone ever experienced something similar? Or does anyone have any advice on how to deal with this kind of thing? I still get freaked out sometimes, and I don't really talk about it with anyone in real life. Thanks for listening. I had the most terrifying I have to get out of here now feeling at my boyfriend's 150-year-old lodge. My cousin was getting married in Augusta, Georgia, last June. My boyfriend and I live in Baton Rouge and we're going to be staying at his grandparents' lodge that was empty so we didn't overcrowd my family's houses. The lodge sits on about 15 acres in the middle of Augusta. It's busy all around, but because of where the house sits, it feels like you're in the middle of nowhere. You don't hear anything from the surrounding areas except for animals. Now keep in mind we had stayed here plenty of times before. When we got there, we had to manually turn on the water and the electricity. The water is out by the road, but the electricity is in the basement. This basement looks like it came straight out of The Conjuring. Old, dusty, and full of crap that hasn't been touched in years. The walls are gross, and paint on the stairs has chipped away over the years. The only light in the basement is these tiny, long windows at the top of the wall, and they have a frosted over look, so not much light gets through. Anyway, we get everything turned on and get unpacked. We always stayed in the front bedroom because we were uncomfortable staying in the back. According to my boyfriend's family, a family friend had been staying there and ended himself in the back bedroom. A door in the kitchen separates the front of the house from the back hallway with the basement, laundry, master bed, and bathroom, so I never really got freaked out because it felt like a whole different house. Over the next few days, everything felt cozy and normal. The night of the wedding, my brother and his girlfriend came by to get ready. Since there were so many of us, we used the back room because the bathroom is huge. Before we left for the wedding, we packed everything up and moved it to the front because we would be going to stay with some of my other family. We didn't turn off the water or power yet because we had food in the fridge and didn't want to melt in the heat of a Georgia night packing up the car. It was well past dark when we got back. We started packing everything up, and once we got it out, we had to go to the creepy basement to turn the power off. I had a weird feeling when we walked to the back of the house through the door into the basement, so I didn't go further than halfway down the stairs. The only light we had was the flashlights on our phones. Out of nowhere, this sense of complete dread washed over me. Every hair on my body was standing straight up. I was sick to my stomach and started sweating. Imagine the most terrified you have ever been, and it is probably close to this feeling. All I could think was, I have to get out of here now. I yelled to my boyfriend that we had to go now. He didn't say a thing but hurried back up for us to leave. Going back up the stairs, I swear it felt like something brushed my ankle. As I backed out my Jeep, I just knew something was staring at me. I knew at any moment something or someone would pop up in the reverse lights. Thankfully nothing did. After we were a few miles away, my boyfriend asked me what was wrong. As I told him, he stopped me and said, "Thank God you felt that too." He goes on to tell me that almost every night we were there, he would get woken up by a loud scream. It would sound farther off and then get so close that he said it sounded like someone was in his ear. He and his family are sensitive to spirits, so it didn't scare him too much. But he said he had never felt the evil he did right before we left. I don't know what or who that feeling was, but I just hope I never feel it again. I was 7 to 9 years old at the time. I just got home from school. I laid my backpack down and got out of my shoes and jacket. I ate and did my homework. After doing my homework, I got to the bedroom and lay down. The door was open. My mother was watching TV in the living room. I was on her phone playing games. I heard her get up and go outside, a daily thing she does. So I didn't think about it. My eyes shift from the phone and focus on the door. I saw a head, black hair, like the back of my mother's head. I called out, "Mama?" I thought she was pranking me, but then I realized she wasn't here. I didn't know if it was looking at me or at the wall. I started to get scared. I called out again, "Mama?" It didn't move an inch. I stayed in the bed, clutching at the sheets. As soon as the door opened, it disappeared. I told it to my mother. She didn't believe me, of course. As years passed, I talked about it to her again. It seemed like she didn't remember it, even if it were just a few years and she had a good memory. It still haunts my thoughts since I didn't know what it was. But I swear I saw it. I don't remember it that well, so the text maybe doesn't make it seem real. But I saw it, and it haunts me still to this day. Little girl who isn't. My husband and I have just bought a 5-bed house and moved 2 days ago. Everything was fine and great, and we were excited about the extra room. We were choosing what room could be a nursery, as I'm pregnant, and we're just dumping our boxes around, ordering takeout, etc. We were simply enjoying ourselves. I would say the first thing I noticed was when I was lying on our bed moving my pregnancy pillow around and playing some stupid game on my phone. It sounded like whispers coming from the bathroom across the room to me. We have mirrored wardrobes, so I looked in that and into the open door and didn't see anything. Weird, it must be me just adjusting and imagining things. It didn't happen again, and I brushed it off. Takeaway came. We were nestled down on the sofa with the other boxes ready to do for tomorrow when I, being the fatty, went to go get another plate. I got up, walked into the kitchen, and swear I saw something by the sink standing, facing the window, and looking outside. It looked very tall and just black. I turned on the light, and nothing was there. Okay, I'm officially crazy right now. I had a dream that night of a little girl wanting me to chase her to play throughout the house. I was thinking this could be our future child, as we don't know what we are having yet. She looked very cute. Dark brown pigtails and a small little pink dress. I also thought this could be our child, as it had the same color hair as we do and my husband's green eyes. She stopped outside the nursery room and ran in with a giggle. I opened the door and couldn't find her anywhere. In my dream something big and black, and I remember it had claws too, well, it jumped out at me with a screech, and I woke up. I woke up feeling like I needed to throw up. In the morning I told my husband the dream and laughed it off like, OMG, look how crazy this pregnancy is making me, in a sort of way. He told me he had a dream of a little girl, too. He described her every detail right down to her frilly socks and shoes she was wearing. He said in his dream he was using the family bathroom as I was in ours. He walked to come ask me if I needed anything, and he saw her standing in the nursery room just glaring at him. He said he went to ask her who she was, why she was in our house, and where her parents were, and she disappeared. He then followed it with another dream. Despite having died 2 years ago, his mom appeared in this dream. She was telling him to be careful and that the girl isn't a girl at all, rather something pretending to be, and that we should be careful. A mimic stalks my friend and me. In the spring of 2024, my friend and I both decided to sneak out. We were just being stupid and wanted to have some fun because we couldn't hang out much. We go to a gas station and buy some snacks and other items, then sit in a parking lot and mess around. It's just us two, and once the awkward silence hits, it gets way colder. We decide to go across a bridge to get to a park. There is a bike trail, and we were both on our bikes, so we decided to follow it to the park. It goes under the bridge, and once we pass under, the temperature drops so low so fast. We finally get to the park and start seeing what we have to mess around with. We start moving towards these dinosaurs you can rock back and forth on. Right behind one of them, we see a large shadow figure with long limbs. My friend says, I don't know what the duck you are, but you cannot follow us. He continued with the Lord's word, and we got out of there. Perspective explains the differences between us, as we both agreed on what we observed that night. Fast forward to last weekend, and we're ducking around in my room. We bring up the ghost and both get cold but don't think anything of it. We go out again and duck around and try to find some hiding spots. We find a pit he can fit in, and I put a board over him. As soon as we aren't near each other, we both feel like something is trying to get us. He gets in another one, but we maintain eye contact this time, and nothing happens. We find a pile of wood, and I start hiding in it. Then, I hear my mom scream my name. Background, due to her disability, my mom is unable to leave my house. She also can't yell loudly, and we were a block away. We snap our heads towards each other and run to my house. Earlier today, we went to the park we first saw it. Someone screams my name, but we're prepared with a crucifix and a Bible. My friend starts reading from it, and when we walk forward, a sign says, God is awesome. We walk into a laundromat and read some prayers. When we get outside, a woman, who previously wasn't on our path or near us, is walking her dog down a path. We wait for her to descend, as we must follow the same path to reach the park. Then follow her. We get to the slide we first counted our materials in. By then, it was almost perfectly dark. We're talking, and out the corner of his eye, he sees a figure that looks like both of us combined run under the slide. He slides the crucifix down so he can see it, then I look over at where the original figure was seen almost a year ago. There, right where we saw it before, we see shadows growing. We get the duck out of there. We also saw the dog lady another time, but she went the same path instead of back where she came. There was a second dog walker we also saw twice. This weekend, we were going to hunt with a friend who has ghost gear. I specifically remember telling my friend that I was going to bless my house with olive oil. When I get home, I see the olive oil in the trash, and my dad tells me my grandparents are coming this weekend. My friend also swears he always hears the mimic saying his name. Please tell me what I saw. So this happened about 4 years ago. I'd like to say this is a true story, but I'm also a writer, and you'll see elements of my writing style in it. Sorry if it feels like a book, but I swear it was a real story. I was working backstage in my school auditorium. This place has been known as haunted for a long time. This was after the stage play was done. The setup of the stage is important in this story. So there was a big wall. It had a makeshift door in the middle of the stage, a good 8 feet from the back of the stage. Behind it, they made a makeshift hallway for actors to run between sides of the stage, as there was no other way to get to the stage. The only door off the stage was on the right side of the stage, and it led to the school hallway. This was how I normally got in and out. I was cleaning up after a show and on the left side of the stage. I was being stupid and on stage by myself. The only lights were from the audience area, so the stage was actually decently dark, and the makeshift hallway was completely dark apart from a blue light at the end of it. So I was walking from the left side of the stage to the right to leave. I was in the makeshift hallway. I looked up to see where some ladders were lying against the back wall of the stage. The blue light normally would let a small shine reflection show off them, but this time I saw darkness. It was a human figure. That's when I called out, "Anyone there?" Biggest mistake of my life. I realized this figure was 9 feet tall, and that was not normal. The figure turned towards me. It appeared to be the outline of a dark abyss, but it was actually the outline of a human figure. This is what throws me off. As I've actually seen shadowing abyss people before, once before when this happened, when the big figure ghost thing turned towards me, I could feel its shock, like it didn't expect me to be there. I felt like I was going to be sneaking up on someone else with bad intentions, but I showed up, surprised them, and ruined it. I then nearly screamed and ran off of the stage via the makeshift door in the makeshift hallway. I ran outside of that door and got off the stage and into the audience area where there were lights. I never saw this figure again, and I was very uneasy. This happened about a week ago with an old friend who was visiting. I live way out in the middle of nowhere, in the woods of the Pacific Northwest. Normally things are a little creepy at night, but just the normal amount for where I live. Anyway, I'm enjoying summer, and I had a friend who had moved away a year ago come down to visit. It was nice seeing him, since he used to live just a mile down the road, and now since he's gone, it had been a while since we had met in person. Every time we hang out, we like to go on a night walk and just talk about life. This night, though, we got a little scared by the end. We were getting close to where his old house was, and just before you pass it, there's a section where you get surrounded by trees on both sides of the back road, and a house or two before it opens up to the fields being on one side. I was on his right, he was on my left, and there was a single street lamp halfway down the road. In the distance, from the light, we were able to see the outline of a person or maybe two walking toward us, which surprised us since it was around 2 in the morning, but we didn't think much of it. We kept walking and then realized it was actually a group, around 4 people total. At this point we didn't have our light on but thought it'd make sense to turn on a flashlight so they knew we were there and we didn't accidentally scare them. The street lamp sits a bit up, and as they walked toward us, they disappeared into the dark, and we were just waiting to walk past them, but we hadn't come by them when it seemed we should have already. Then we walked past almost where we had originally seen them, and my friend stopped to point out how odd it was we hadn't run into them yet. As soon as he finished mentioning it, we were quiet for a second and heard a single stick break further into the woods, like perfectly timed, like a horror movie lol. Then we kept walking in silence, and when I turned to the left, I swear that I saw something in the shape of a person just standing and staring at me. I looked to my other side and turned back, shining a light at the bush, and all I saw was the edge of a shadow move from it as the leaves and branches swayed. At this point I had my knife drawn, and my friend had his fists clenched as we just walked calmly in silence, hoping to make it to the streetlight, occasionally whispering to the other, deciding if we should run or not. We made it to the light and called another friend to lighten the mood as we made our way home. It was scary, and the next morning we rode the mini bikes down to where it had happened and saw that specific part of the woods had a fence of barbed wire right where the people, or whatever they were, disappeared. This happened 5 years ago, I'm only ready to talk about it now. This experience happened when I was 21, 5 years ago. It's something that has been on my mind since then, but I've never talked about it. I went to dinner with a friend from university, let's call her Amy. We had 1 glass of red wine each with dinner. I was staying at her house that night, and by the time we got back, I was totally sober. It was 1 glass of wine with dinner anyway, I never felt tipsy. Amy was in her ensuite brushing her teeth, and I was lying in her double bed on my side, facing the bathroom that Amy was in. All of a sudden I felt the very distinct feeling of a hand with long nails go down my back, from my neck to the bottom. It felt like a real hand. I could feel the long nails of all the fingers, and it tickled in the same way a person's hand would. I spun around in shock and faced the other side of the bedroom, and for a split second, I saw a tall, middle-aged man facing me with his eyes boring into mine. It was the most uncomfortable, unnatural thing I've ever felt. He was perfectly aligned with the far wall of the bedroom. I saw him about 5 meters away, so there's no explanation for the human hand scratching down my back. I was crying and shouted for Amy even though she was just next door. I told her what happened. I was super emotional at this point, and then she started crying. I asked why, and she told me that she felt like someone had been watching her from the corner of her room for months. She even showed me texts to her boyfriend where she'd told him she was struggling to sleep because she felt like she was being watched. A well-known male serial killer, in London at least, that preyed on young men used to live 2 doors down from Amy's house. I didn't know this until I looked it up after. It's taken me years to process this because of how real it was. I felt the hand scratch me, I saw the man. This stuff is real. Alright, so this happened legit 14 hours ago, still shaking while typing. I work night shifts, 3 a.m. to 11 a.m., and I live alone in a small town outside Chicago. Usually, I am quite relaxed. Anyway, last night around 2:45 a.m. I was walking to my car, and the parking lot was empty, no wind, dead silent. You could hear the gravel under your shoes silent. As I'm unlocking my door, I hear this high-pitched whine, like TV static mixed with a dog crying. I turn around and swear on my life, there's this tall-ass figure just standing at the edge of the lot, right by the tree line. I blinked, and the figure was suddenly 2 steps closer. Not walking. Just closer. I said nah out loud and got in my car fast. Locked the doors, turned the lights on, and it was gone. I drove out so quick I didn't even buckle up until I hit the main road. But here's the real weird part. Later, I checked my dashcam and found it unplugged. I rarely use that device. It auto-records every drive. The cord was dangling loosely. There was no way for it to come out on its own. Got back home, checked my Ring cam. And bro, at 3:01 a.m., there's footage of me pulling into the driveway, but I'm just sitting in the car. For like 4 minutes. Not moving. Just staring. I don't remember that. I've been feeling off all day. It feels like I'm being watched. My dog won't even go near my car now. He barked at it like it was a whole person inside. Is this sleep deprivation? Glitch in the Matrix? Skinwalker? Ike. But something isn't right. Has anyone ever seen something that moves closer when you blink? Please tell me I'm not the only one. A mimic of my sister answered the door? My aunt was telling me she and my niece, 12, came over to my house to drop something off 2 days ago, around 8:30 at night. I try to leave my porch and kitchen lights off as much as possible to save, but I'll turn them on when I answer the door for anyone. This interaction took place in the dark, no porch lights were on, and the kitchen light wasn't on. My aunt was sitting in her car with her headlights on, facing the door, so she watched this whole thing happen. My niece knocked on my front door, I have a screen door, and said my sister answered the door but was behind the screen door. She said she also saw my other sister's boyfriend standing behind her in the kitchen. She tried to ask for me, but my sister didn't say anything to her and just stared at her through the screen door. She said something seemed off about her. She got scared, so she ran back to the car and told her mom what happened. My 2 sisters and the BF moved out going on 2 months ago. I live alone. I was home alone that night. I was in my room the whole night. I didn't hear the knocking or talking or anything. The only thing I remember happening was my dog barking. I paused my TV and sat in silence trying to hear anything that would make him bark but heard nothing. I don't know what time that was, but I'm assuming he heard the knocking. I asked my aunt over and over again if she was sure that happened because I was home alone and there is no way either of my sisters or the BF could have answered the door. She and my niece swear that happened, and now I don't feel comfortable in my own home. My dog this morning kept growling and barking. He's very sweet and quiet unless he feels threatened/in danger, at something I couldn't see or hear that freaked me out even more. Recently, I've had this fear of encountering a mimic since living home alone, so I'm very on edge. I don't know what to think of this but wanted to share. This happened quite a while ago, but I still get chills when I think of it. I was sitting in my brother's room before bedtime, this was in grade 7, waiting for him to come in so we could talk before going to sleep like we always did. All of a sudden I saw him peek around the corner of the door and just smile. It was incredibly creepy, and he had a very wide smile, which I found weird as he was very insecure about his mouth. This was pre-braces. The only lights on were in our adjacent rooms, so the dark seemed to engulf him, making him look blurry. At first, I was slightly weirded out and scared, but I quickly recovered, thinking this was him trying to scare me. It's not unusual for him to do so, given my inherent fear, and his tendency to frighten me by leaping out at me or forcing me to watch movies featuring jump scares. I threw the closest thing to me at him, a stuffed penguin toy, and he just went back around the corner, the creepy smile remaining. A minute or two later he came back, and I just sort of laughed and said, "Ha ha, yeah, you're so scary, don't do that again." He looked at me and got very confused. He said he had been somewhere else for the past few minutes. I don't remember where because of how long ago this was. We went back and forth, with me convinced it happened and him saying I probably imagined the whole thing as it was getting late and I was tired. The thing is, I know I didn't. The penguin plush was still there. He had walked right past it in the hallway and stepped over it. Other than my own account, there's no other proof. He swears to this day, years later, that he didn't do it. I only half believe him. While most of it was in character, the smile is the one thing that wasn't. I need another opinion, as it sometimes keeps me up at night wondering what the actual fuck was out in the hall. Has anyone experienced anything similar or have any ideas what this imposter was? Please help. My Gran's house. My granddad died roughly 10 months before I was born. My cousin is the youngest in the family to have met him, and she claims that when she was staying at my Gran's house one night after he had died, she woke up and he was standing at the end of the bed watching her. I say, get it out of the way, because that's literally all I know, and frankly, my cousin is a prick, and she lies. So who knows? Anyway. Moving on. The remaining events occurred in a different room from the one my cousin claims to have had an experience in. This room was the smallest bedroom. And I hated this room. For as long as I can recall, I hated how it made me feel, and I used to always say it was haunted. Even before I had any experience I couldn't quite explain. One of the weird feelings came from behind the door, where there was a narrow recess in the wall. It was maybe 15 inches across, and my gran used it to store loose odds and ends, like rolls of wrapping paper and such. But for some reason, I always felt like something was watching me through that little gap in the wall. Once when I was probably 5 years old, I was staying the night at my Gran's and had to sleep in that room. Despite every effort to make the room friendly by putting up Barney wallpaper, for the non-UK, or perhaps younger UK readers, this wasn't Barney the dinosaur, but a cartoon from the late 80s/early 90s about an old English sheepdog, I still hated the room. I was told it was time for bed, and so I made my way up the stairs. At the top, the stairs turned to the right into a short landing, and I had to come back on myself to get to the room at the end. But as I turned, I froze. On the white wooden door in front of me, I could see a face. A face with horns looking back at me. The only way I can describe it is that it was almost like seeing it in my mind's eye rather than a physical mark, but I would swear to you it was right in front of me, looking at me from the door. Now, it could well have been the product of a child's vivid imagination, but it sufficiently freaked me out enough to make me cry with fear and panic, and I ran back downstairs to get an adult and said there was a face on the door. When we were brought back upstairs, it was gone. The third incident happened when I was about 13. Since my gran was the only one in the family with access to Sky TV, I would regularly visit her to watch wrestling on television. On this particular day, I was downstairs watching, and my gran was upstairs. She was usually sewing when she was upstairs. She had one of the old Singer sewing machines with a treadle. It was a large, cast iron machine with a sturdy wooden frame. For further context, my gran was easily 4 feet 9 inches, a tiny woman with her healthiest years behind her for sure. Anyway, I was downstairs watching The Rock do his thing, and I heard a terrific bang from upstairs. I rushed upstairs to check my gran was okay when I saw her come out of her bedroom, and the sewing machine, which easily weighed upwards of 30 pounds, was on the floor, having tipped itself over. Lastly, some years later, I was speaking to my aunt. She had spent a lot of her childhood in the 60s and 70s growing up in that house, and she said that room had been her bedroom. She shared with me her dislike for the room, her belief in its haunting, and her personal experience with it. The bedroom sat at the front side of the house and had one window, which was directly above the front door. She recalled that one day she was out in the street playing with friends while her siblings and parents were at work. She is the youngest of 4. Something made her look up at the house, and in the window she could see the figure of a man standing looking out onto the street, despite knowing for sure that there was nobody home. So that's the story of my Gran's house. Sadly, We lost contact with the house when she moved out in 2010 and died in 2012. But I still regularly think about the house and the weird feeling I got in that bedroom throughout my childhood, and only in that bedroom. I don't think about the rest of the house. I'm, really bad at explaining stories, but my dad got me a dog when I was still in high school, a few years ago. I had a small room at my old house with a sliding/folding closet door. However, as a kid I broke it because I was very clumsy, so my closet was always open. I had a floor-length mirror that was on my wall behind my door that happened to be next to the closet door that was broken. So one day I'm sitting on the floor in front of the mirror, and my dog is lying on the edge of my bed watching me, as he does to this day. He just follows me around. My TV was playing a random video. I'm sure it was a random gamer playing a scary game, so I didn't hear, nor was I paying attention when the closet door kind of slid open towards me. My dog does this thing where the hair on his mid-back starts to rise and he'll make this burr noise. It sounds like he's puffing noise out of his cheeks. It's almost as if he's issuing a warning, threatening to growl or bark if the object doesn't move. So he stands up on my bed, and he starts doing his thing. I think I might have accidentally knocked it out of place, so I push it back. He's still on the bed, but now he's focused on something at the bottom of the closet. So now I'm paying attention. After I push it back and, stabilize it, it almost starts sliding back at me. My dog is blowing air out of his cheeks, but now he's full on growling. So now I'm starting to get scared, and I push it closed again. The damn thing slides back at me. I pull out my phone and start recording. The minute I started, my dog slides his eyes up in the closet, like he's following something, and then out of my closet onto my ceiling, and he goes absolutely ballistic. He starts barking at the ceiling, gets off of my bed, and stands in front of me and continues to bark. When my dad got home from work, I showed him the video, and he thought I should send it in to a YouTube channel we watch, but I got so scared I deleted it, and eventually I got rid of that phone. But my dog saw things in that house all the time. There were times he would bark at my closet in the middle of the night to the point where he wouldn't let me get off of the bed to go check. What could have been watching us? Hi everyone. This story goes way back to 2019-2020, when my friends and I were all around 13. Back then, our friend group was relatively closed off, consisting of only 4 members. However, that year, we welcomed a new student who was unfamiliar with the group, ensuring she didn't feel excluded. So now the group consisted of me, my childhood best friend. We used to spend every single day together, but when we were 14, we essentially stopped talking, which is not really part of the story, but it is important to know that at this point, there was already some toxic behavior from her side towards most of the group. Another friend who we've known since first grade and is to this day one of my closest friends, somebody from our class who never really believed in anything paranormal and would say we were being ridiculous for believing it, and the new girl who was having a hard time and sometimes starting fights over nothing. I promise all of this is important context. Now the actual story starts in summer 2019 when my ex-best friend, we'll call her E for this story, and the friend I've known since first grade, we'll call her A, were having a sleepover at E's house, and at this point the 3 of us were somewhat interested in witchcraft, all in different ways. I was probably the most invested. But essentially, from what I know, all 3 of us would talk a lot about paranormal and anything witchy. So after E and A talked and got bored, they decided to leave the house in the middle of the night. They only went to an abandoned house at the end of S Street and didn't go in because before they even had the chance, they saw a weird shadowy figure standing behind a corner, which really scared them and made them run home. Especially because they've been feeling like someone was watching them since the moment they left S house. When they told me about this at first, I was thinking a person could have been watching, but they insisted it did not look like a real person. We'd meet often, especially on that street, even during the day when we felt watched and saw shadowy figures. Admittedly, we did try to communicate in small ways because we were young baby witches and very curious. Never really got an answer, just experiences becoming more frequent. It's also important to point out that I and A live on the other side of the town, and E and the new girl live in that street where all this would happen tenfold, even though we would all have experiences even in other places. There were many specific instances, but they would usually all be the same, just a shadowy figure, a random heavy feeling of fear and sadness, or feeling like you were being followed. After months of these experiences and all 3 of us always talking about them, we decided it might go away if we just ignored it, which after a couple more months happened. There were no more footsteps following us, no shadowy figures observing us from windows or corners, and no strange eyes peering at us. The group ended up falling apart not even a year after, and some of the people still can't stand each other. To this day I'm unsure what the figure was, but the last time I thought about it fully until now was when I was about 15 and talking to A. We essentially agreed it was probably something feeding off of Ease and the new girl's negative energy, since both of them were constantly being toxic at the time and ended up making everyone in the group feel bad all the time, and the toxicity of the group was getting worse and worse as the experiences continued and got more intense. I really wanted to share it with people and see if someone might have a different opinion on what all this could mean and what was watching us. I live with my boyfriend. Every day he leaves for work early in the morning, and I get to sleep a bit more. Sometimes he comes back from work early due to some problem in the office, like the internet crashing. This is what I thought happened one morning when I woke up hearing noises all across the apartment, like footsteps, doors, etc. I was very sleepy, so I just waited until he came into the room to say hi or give me a kiss. I saw the room's door slightly open and my boyfriend's voice speaking to me, but I couldn't see his face through the door crack. He started speaking to me in a loving, baby voice, like he usually does, but this is when I started to feel like it wasn't him at all. The voice was saying stuff like, "Hello, baby, you're so pretty. I love you so much, baby. Who's my darling, my love?" Over and over in such a mocking way. He never did this. It felt like something was trying to pretend to be him being invited into the room, like I always do to my boyfriend when I ask him to join me in the bed for cuddles. This is the moment I realized I should just be quiet and ignore it. I went back to sleep, and when I woke up, the door was in fact slightly open, but the rest of the apartment was intact. No one came in. This exact thing happened again twice, the most recent being yesterday. I had paranormal events my whole life, some being impossible to explain and way too real to just shrug off. I also have sleep paralysis sometimes, so yeah, this could be it, even though I think this is a strangely specific thing to dream over and over. But this time it feels so different. Since then, I've been experiencing a sense of presence in the apartment. I've seen silhouettes, and objects have been moving erratically throughout the day, even with the windows closed. This has led my boyfriend to believe that we have rats, despite the fact that we don't. I'm starting to think that maybe this is something that needs an invitation and is trying to get it from me while I'm most vulnerable and confused sleeping alone. A possible hellhound encounter in Kansas. I grew up in Kansas all my life, and at the time I was just living with my mom. We would stay up all night watching movies on the floor since we had no couch, and we would watch movies on an old computer since we also had no TV. We would stay up late watching all kinds of movies, from horror to comedy, and we would often drive to the gas station in the middle of the night for snacks and drinks. Well, one night it would have been around 2 a.m. when we left the house and drove down the road to the gas station as usual, yet on the way back, going down the main road, which during the day is very, very busy, but this late it's dead. Me and some friends, we would lay down in the middle of the road at night, that's how dead it got outside. So we were about halfway back home when I saw this large wolf or some kind of dog-shaped animal run in front of us at unnatural speeds. It vanished in an instant, and I swear I could see through it like a shadow. I thought I was just going crazy or something until my mom said, "Did you see that?" We both recounted the exact same experience. We stopped the car and looked out the window, but nothing was visible. It vanished into 2 solid buildings without a trace. Probably nothing, but it was an odd encounter. There is something watching me. It started because of all of the craziness. Someone I know tested positive, so to protect the rest of my family, I moved into a spare, unused bedroom. This room is great. I have a sink, a mini fridge, a hot plate to heat water for tea, and a TV with my Switch hooked up. My Kindle with all the books I could dream of. I have a door that goes outside so I can get dressed and go to work. I am essential. I work in a grocery store. Unlike everyone else in the house, I have to leave. I share a bathroom with my husband, but that is it. I rarely see anyone else outside of work or through the windows when I get home. The first few nights were awesome. I played on my game system and started reading. I've been working on the 5th novel since last week. Then it started. A feeling, at first. Someone was watching me. There is a big window in this room, as it's normally the plant window. One of those big 3-pane semicircular windows that is big enough to put a sitting area in if you wanted to. Specifically through the right glass panel that faces my bed. The feeling comes and goes, but only at night. I am not modest. I couldn't care less if someone saw me naked. I'm not promiscuous by any means, but I'm not particularly attractive either. I have short buzzed hair, extra poundage, and nerdy glasses. My eyes are a cool hazel that swaps from brown to green, but the rest of me is bigger than average. To work, I usually wear dress pants and collared shirts, and at home, leggings and hoodies. Not really the type of woman most peeping toms would look in on, let alone come back for more. The feeling comes and goes. It has been happening more often than not. It only ever happens at night, and it happens whether my light is on or off. What started as a feeling slowly developed into a malevolence. It feels more and more like someone is watching me with intense anger and hatred. I don't know how else to explain it. As if someone from outside is trying to get in, and their hate is palpable. Then dreams started. Probably brought on by this feeling. Someone is standing there. A figure, just stating it. Unmoving, usually, not even the subtle sway of a living person. Not a rise and fall of breathing. At first, the figure was just a shadow. There are still no features, but it has become a solidified darkness. As if the figure was literally cut out at the edges and darkness remained. I always wake up covered in sweat, terrified, and staring out the window. Sometimes I can fall back asleep if I can completely cover every inch of myself with a blanket, just like a child. I have gotten to where I can't sleep unless that door to the porch and the outside is locked, and I can focus on some sort of calming audio to distract me. I can't understand. What is this thing? Why is it so angry at me? What did I do to get its attention? How do I make it go away? No, I don't do any drugs. Never have. I have at most a cider every other day with dinner. I am so freaked out about whatever is making this feeling and these dreams happen. Sorry, this is the only place I felt I could share where people might believe me. Are there any things that follow this pattern? I am not familiar with many paranormal stories outside of usual fairy tales. My property is severely haunted. In 1995 I purchased about 200 acres for recreational purposes. Over the years, by getting out and scouting the area, we have found 2 undocumented cemeteries. The headstones are so worn that you can't read the words or dates, and some have no engravings. In 2003, I decided to build a cabin and ditch the camper setup. Since then, I've felt as though I've provoked a significant amount of anger or agitation. Subsequently, I entered the cabin and found it in a state of disarray. Things turned over, things on the floor, you name it. No forced entry, no broken windows, no window locks forgotten to be locked, nothing stolen. It's just really weird and totally random the times it's happened. On 2005 deer season eve, I invited some close friends to come and stay and hunt the next morning. We all got in after work at 30 and planned to cook a steak, have a few beers, and just hang out and catch up. It was about 8 p.m. on a Friday night when it started. We had a campfire going out back, and we were sitting around telling war stories. Everyone started to get hungry, so I walked inside to grab the platter of steaks. I heard a commotion out at the campfire. The grill was on the back patio, and as I walked out, one of the guys said, "You didn't have to hit John with a stick, you couldn't have just thrown it at his feet," as some chuckling ensued. I didn't know what they were talking about. I said, "What do you mean?" The guy said, "Well, somebody threw a 2-foot stick and hit John right in the side of the head, it almost knocked him out." I said, "Man, I walked inside to throw some seasoning on the steaks and grabbed another beer, but it wasn't me." Sure enough, though, the stick was about 2 feet long and about 1.5 inches in diameter. It was a calm, cold night, no wind at all, and no trees within 50 feet or so of the fire pit, so it wasn't a stray limb that broke off and fell on him. John said I was just standing here with my back turned to the fire and heard a stick tumbling through the air, and then boom, it hit me right in the side of the head. He said I didn't know what in the hell was going on and figured it was you playing a joke or something. I said, "I swear it wasn't me." They all kind of jumped up and ran over to the grill where I was, and then they all ran inside to get their rifles, pistols, and flashlights. Someone said there is something in those damn woods. Well, we all quietly eased outside through the front door. We got over to the corner of the cabin and came to a stop and were just listening. You could hear the crunching of leaves from a really slow walk, and it sounded like it was about 100 feet away in the woods. We all grouped together and started walking towards this thing, and we turned on the flashlights in the vicinity of the walking sound. The woods are pretty clean in this area, not a whole lot of underbrush, so you can see a good ways with a flashlight, but there was nothing, and the walking sound was still going. We are talking about 6 grown men that have been in the woods all of our lives, and we were all freaked out, to be honest with you. Anyways, we continued the night and kept our heads on a swivel, and nothing else happened, but it was a weird event to say the least. A few years later our kids got old enough to come hang out with us and go hunting on their own. We had a big get-together with basically the same people plus a few more. Well, the boys wanted to walk to one of the cemeteries I previously spoke about. I guess they wanted to see how big they were, so anyways, after we ate, I told them we would all walk over there later in the night. I placed my pistol by my side and grabbed a flashlight, following suit with all the other men. The cemetery is about 500 to 600 yards away from the cabin, with a good, wide trail through the woods. We got to walking through the woods, and about halfway there I thought I heard something walking next to us that wasn't part of the group. Initially, I dismissed it, assuming it was just my imagination. Well, my buddy kind of walked up from the middle of the pack and whispered, "Who do you have in the woods?" I knew then that I wasn't just hearing things. I told everybody to stop and not move and not say anything. John was there again and quietly said, "It's that thing from 3 to 4 years ago." Again we all shined the flashlights into the vicinity of the crunching leaves, and there wasn't anything. It was closer this time, though. It would have been really easy to see someone or an animal, but nothing. We all bolted and ran back to the cabin. To this day I don't know what it is, but I don't mess around in the woods at night any longer. Weird shit happens down in the basement. So this happened in the basement of my childhood home when I was around 13 or 14 years old. The house didn't feel particularly haunted, but as both of my siblings can attest, strange things used to happen in that basement. I was having a sleepover with a friend, and whenever we stayed at my house, we always slept down there. The basement was fully finished with a big TV, couch, pool table, Murphy bed, the works, so it was great because we rowdy teenagers could hang out down there and not disturb my parents as much. Anyways, we fell asleep watching a movie on DVD, and at some point I recall waking up to the bright yellow selection screen glaring in the dark and the same annoying as sound clip replaying over and over at just a few decibels too loud. Now, it's important to note, to the left of the TV was a tall, skinny closet with a door. I remember we had gone into the closet to grab some extra blankets before starting the movie, and perhaps we didn't close it all the way after because when I woke up, the door was slightly ajar, maybe 3 to 4 inches. So I wake up, and I'm in that weird, surreal state where I can't really tell if I'm awake yet or still asleep, just dreaming. But I look at the TV and am suddenly frozen with fear. Right in front of the TV on the left-hand side was this tall, skinny black shadow obstructing the bright yellow color of the screen. It didn't have any particular features, more just a dark, vaguely shaped mist of a standing figure. Suddenly, almost as if the shadow noticed me looking at it, the mist quickly drifts into the closet next to the TV, and y'all, I swear, the ducking door closes shut behind it. At this point I'm so scared I couldn't move. I wanted to wake up my friend so badly, but I couldn't even bring myself to speak. I just sat there hoping I was seeing things and or trying to convince myself that I was still asleep and it was, in fact, just a dream. All of a sudden my friend, whom I thought was asleep this entire time, sits straight up next to me on the couch and goes, "My name, did you just ducking see that?" We sprinted up those goddamn stairs so fast our feet barely touched the ground. Really, I don't think I've ever run like that in my entire life. We told my parents the next morning, and they just laughed at us, clearly not believing it. But when I told my siblings the same story, they both just shrugged. Each responded similarly with something along the lines of weird shit only happens down in the basement. Childhood paranormal experience. I used to live in Riverside, California. My mom, grandma, and I lived in a blue house that was located in a fairly low-income neighborhood that was surrounded by dirt roads, ranches, and tightly condensed homes, just to try and paint a picture. In my room, upon entering from my door, to your immediate left would be my bed against the wall vertically touching the corner of the room. My room had all carpet flooring, and every other night around 11 p.m. to 2 a.m., I would hear someone begin to walk from my door, alongside my bed, and end up where my head was. They would never pick up their feet, so it would sound as if someone was dragging their feet across the carpet the entire way through, where every time I would move, the dragging would immediately stop and begin back from my door and make its way towards me in the same path/manner. Some nights, the air from my set stationary fan, one of those normal, circular ones that did have the capability to rotate, would abruptly stop as if someone was standing in front blocking it. I would never be able to rationally come to the conclusion as to how that would even be possible considering the fan was stationary and the air had been hitting me just fine prior to it being blocked for approximately 8 seconds at a time. I finally told my grandmother and mom what I had been experiencing a few years after the fact, and they confessed to me that one night when I had been sleeping over at my uncle's and it was just the two of them, they had been eating dinner in the kitchen when they both heard someone opening and shutting my drawers from top to bottom. They both thought someone had broken in through my window and was, one by one, going through my drawers trying to gather as much as they could. When they finally had the courage to get up and check, they opened my door and found everything intact. No intruder, no mess, no drawers left open, nothing. They admitted they didn't want to tell me out of fear of scaring me, which, at that point, they didn't know I had been woken up by hearing someone drag their feet across my carpet every other night at 1 in the morning. My grandmother also came forward and told me that while my mother was at work and I was at school, one day she had gone to the kitchen to get some fruit when she looked down the hallway and saw a tall, solid, black figure walk right into my mom's room. She said this was the darkest black she had ever seen, and that figure was so tall that it had to duck its head under the doorframe to comfortably walk in. She said she immediately rushed to her room, locked the door behind her, and waited anxiously for us to get home. She even waited to use the restroom. She was so terrified of walking out of her room. The last thing we all experienced at different times throughout our time staying there was the doorbell randomly going off every few months. The problem was that the doorbell did not work, as the button was non-existent, with the wiring coming out from the hole where the button should be, which is a cliché out of a horror movie. This is the only one where I can possibly think a more rational explanation can be thought of, but given the context of what went on in this house, it's difficult to chalk up possible faulty wiring. I understand there are skeptics, and people listening to this may not believe me, which is understandable. I am someone who has always thought things through rationally, i.e., a footstep on the hardwood floor can be the wood expanding through the varying temperature, etc., but there are genuinely some things that I cannot point out, nor can I be able to sit there and think of a reasonable explanation as to why this or that happened, and that small, blue house in Riverside is a testament to this. I haven't thought about this in years, and the only reason why it came back flooding my memories was because my 2-year-old son had begun screaming bloody murder as I held him while brushing his teeth. He had been staring at something in the corner of the ceiling of my bathroom that wasn't there, but I could tell something was there staring back at him just by the way he was frozen looking up at that corner. Need a bit of help understanding an old experience. So to start off, I've always been curious about the paranormal. My dad has told me plenty of stories and swears on the fact that he has lived in 2 houses that were very haunted and active. However, up to this point, I hadn't experienced anything myself. When I was around 12 to 13, my grandmother, her man at the time, and my aunt drove across the country to visit us, the first time in many years. One day, I, my dad, and my aunt went out for lunch while my grandma stayed behind. When we came back from lunch, her car was still in the driveway, but neither she nor her man was in the open part of the house. We got to the kitchen, and my dad yelled down the hallway, "Mom, are you back there?" Since at the end of the hallway was the bathroom, we figured she may just be in there. After literally 2 seconds, all 3 of us heard her yell out, "Yeah, I'll come out in a second." It was perfectly clear, and my dad just said, "Okay. We're just at the table." It was exactly her voice. My dad and aunt both knew immediately it was her, and so did I. I shit you not. About 10 to 15 minutes later, our front door opens, and in walks my grandma and her man. All of us gasped in shock, and my aunt burst into tears as my dad and I stared at each other, stunned. My dad and I searched the whole house after where the voice came from, and it was totally empty, no nothing. I genuinely can't talk to my aunt about it because she gets incredibly uncomfortable and upset about it. This incident occurred nearly a decade ago, and it continues to haunt me. What the duck was that? And what on earth was speaking to us in my nan's voice? Any talk on the subject helps because I've never told the story before. A year in a haunted house, the swarm, the shadows, and the last greeting. 2 years ago, I moved into a house where I lived for a year with my sister. The windows were small, letting in little sunlight, so we kept the lights on all day. After just a few months, I developed insomnia. My sister and I, despite having a good relationship, started arguing about everything. I found myself ensnared in compulsive thoughts, tormented by nightmares, and even resorted to blaspheming, a behavior I had never engaged in before. You might think it was just the psychological effect of a dark house, but here's where things get creepy. My sister and I shared a room. One night, while lying in bed, she suddenly asked, "Do you see the kitchen light turning on and off?" I looked and replied, "No, I don't see anything, you're probably hallucinating." She shrugged it off and went back to sleep. A few months later, summer arrived. My girlfriend came to stay for vacation while my sister went to my mom's. One night, as we were going to bed, she suddenly asked, "Did you see that swarm of flies behind the chandelier?" I checked and saw nothing. "No, there aren't any flies," I told her. She said, "It was like a shadow laying on you," and then started flying around. Then, without me adding anything else, she started praying. That shook me, because I never spoke to her about happenings in the house. What she saw couldn't be a product of any past story. Afterward, she managed to sleep. Roaches infested the house that summer. But I swear, in that moment, there had been no swarm. There was not even a single fly present. A few days later, as if weirdness wasn't already enough, a prostitute rang my doorbell. She was a desperate young woman, crying and begging me for the owner's phone number so she could ask for a room. I helped her contact him, but afterward, I was in shock. Her crying had sounded unnatural, and it made me upset. "Let me introduce you to the owner," an 88-year-old man known for his greed, resided upstairs. Since my apartment was at ground level, he would sometimes peer into my windows, forcing me to keep the curtains closed for privacy. Every time I signed the rent receipt, he would say, "Well, that's done," before adding, "just like the man who ended his wife said." He was a widower. Once a week, I could see police visiting him in his apartment. I never managed to know why. When summer ended, my sister returned, my girlfriend left, and we all agreed, something was wrong with that house. We had to leave immediately. Infestations, insomnia, hallucinations, a crying prostitute, arguments, obsessive thoughts. Everything was becoming twisted. On the last day, as I was cleaning, I opened a broken fridge we had never used. The upper compartment had its sides completely covered with black, open pupae. It felt like the house's final, twisted farewell. As if to say, I was that swarm of flies. That fridge had been empty before. I had checked. It was gut-wrenching. After moving into a new house, all symptoms disappeared. I am a pretty rational person, but this experience really made me rethink the existence of ghosts and presences. I think it's impossible that both my sister and my girlfriend had hallucinations. I believe none of that was a coincidence. What do you think? I'll preface this with I have had many paranormal encounters since I was young, and many were also witnessed by the people I was living with or confirmed by neighbors. We had fallen on some tough times financially and had serious health issues for both of us in 2011, and the only real affordable housing where my son could remain at his current school he loved were some really old apartments. The complex was built in the 1950s and was run down. It was a 2-half split floor plan. My husband and I occupied the master bedroom, which included a separate bathroom. The bedroom was always freezing. I could never stay warm in there, even though it's Texas, and being from Wisconsin, I know what really cold is. The other rooms in the apartment were normal temperature. I never felt comfortable being alone in the apartment. This was mostly because I never felt truly alone. The living room wall with the TV on it was also our bedroom wall and door. We always kept the bedroom door shut. I was in the living room watching TV alone. The spot I always sat in, I swear I could see and hear the bedroom doorknob rattle. Like a gust of wind had been blown at it. Our AC unit was at the other end of the apartment, and there were no vents or windows anywhere near the bedroom door. There was a coat closet door adjacent to the bedroom door in the entryway, and it never did the same thing. Just the bedroom doorknob rattled. We lived on the second floor of a 2-story complex, so no one was above us. The people below us were incredibly quiet people. I never once heard them at all, let alone slamming doors or windows that could have affected us. I was again sitting on the couch facing the bedroom door, reading this time, and out of the corner of my eye I saw a human-sized black shadow. It crossed from the entryway, past the coat closet door, and went right through the bedroom door, rattling the doorknob. I took my glasses off and tried to refocus, thinking there must be a smear or something on my glasses. There was nothing. I got up and went into the bedroom, and nothing was there. About a week later the same thing happened, but this time the shadow was only 2 or 3 feet high. Same path from the entryway, past the coat closet, and right through the bedroom door with the handle rattling again. Got up, went into the bedroom, and nothing was there. A few days later, I caught a glimpse of it again, but this time, it stood full size in the entryway, as if it had been watching me. I only caught a glimpse this time before it disappeared, and this time I saw purple in its face, like purple eyes. It could have been a scarf. A hat? I wasn't usually ever alone in the evenings, but my husband and son were both gone one night. I was watching TV in the living room and felt really anxious, like I was not alone. The bedroom door handle started rattling, along with the door shaking some this time. I started getting pretty freaked out. I knew I needed to go check things out. I got up enough courage knowing that I had to go into the bedroom and that the light switches are in the room, not next to the door, and I needed to use our bathroom, which took going into the dark rooms to get the lights turned on. I took some deep breaths and opened the bedroom door, and as I went straight to the bathroom door in the dark and opened it up, I reached around to the left to flip on the light switch. What I felt instead in the dark was my hand go through some wet substance I can only compare to jello-ish or like hair gel. I was shocked, flipped on the light, and went to grab the hand towel off the rack, completely expecting my whole hand to be soaked in something. It was bone dry. There was nothing different about the bedroom or bathroom yet again, and the sensation of the gel stuff on my hand was gone. My middle daughter was over a few weeks later, sitting at my vanity in our bedroom, which was next to the bedroom door. I had told her of my experiences, and others. She's sensitive too to energies. I was getting dressed, and she was putting on makeup. We were going out. She said, "Mom, the shadow just walked through the door, past me, and into the bathroom." It looked like an old woman. She was the only one who had ever seen it besides me. We actually ended up swapping bedrooms so my son could have more space for his friends to come over and play video games. After we switched bedrooms, I never saw the shadow again, and the other bedroom was always reasonably warm. To this day I'm not sure what I put my hand into that night. I have an idea, but without proof and being alone that night, they are only ideas. We moved a few months later. I've never seen the black shadow again. Creepy encounter I had when I was 5 years old. So a lot of this is very hazy, as I was so young at the time, but the core encounter will always stick with me. I know that I was only 5, as this was verified by my parents, as they were both present when I had my sighting. So it was the spring or summer of 1988. My older cousin was staying with my family. She was about 16 or so and a very troubled young woman. She would get into frequent fights with her mother, my aunt, and would routinely stay over at my family's house until things blew over. One afternoon, I remember being in the backyard with my parents. I went back inside the house to grab a drink from the fridge. While I was doing so, I remember hearing a distinctly male voice coming from the porch at the front of the house. Being a naturally curious kid, I walked over to see who it was that was talking, as there were no other men in the house besides my dad, who was still in the backyard. I walked over and looked out the screen door to see my cousin sitting on the front stairs. All I could see was the back of her head, as she was primarily facing the street. This is when I heard the gruff-sounding male voice again. My cousin turned her face ever so slightly, and her profile came into view. I swear to this day, I will never forget what I saw next. The face I saw was definitely not that of my cousin. It was a sickly pale color, with swollen lips and a featureless black eye with no pupil. I only saw it for a split second, but I was so freaked out that I immediately ran back through the house and outside, where my parents frantically tried to figure out what was wrong and why I had been so frightened. My cousin only stayed a few more nights, and I refused to go near her. Later on, when my dad was cleaning out the basement, he discovered some of my cousin's drawings. Keep in mind, she was a very talented artist. The drawings depicted people burning in some kind of pit. My cousin later admitted that she had been heavily into occult witchcraft at the time. I've kept this story to myself, only sharing it with close friends and family, out of concern that they might think I'm crazy. I found this channel and decided I want to hear everyone's thoughts on it, so here goes nothing. In the winter of 2004, my family moved us up from Florida to a place in Winterport, Maine. I was only 11 at the time, but these events took place over a span of almost 12 years. To summarize, the house they bought had been bought and sold like 4x in a span of like 5 years. And it was on the marsh stream, so running water. This house was weird. It was boxy and not terribly attractive on the outside or inside. It had both a basement and an upstairs, but the basement, in particular, was not a friendly place. It always felt so cold and often like I was being watched by something cold and predatory. Things escalated over time, and as we renovated, things would start happening. Things would go missing, doors would slam, sudden cold would occur, sad feelings would arise, and even a dark body apparition with a weird hat that looked kind of like a fedora would be seen. This sort of thing happened for many years, and to be honest, when we moved into that house, there was some kind of altar in the basement, though I don't think it was black magic or whatever, but Dad got rid of it anyway. To be fair, my father was responsible for a great deal of domestic violence and abuse in that house, which resulted in a high level of negative energy. There were times that we could hear what sounded like someone walking up and down stairs and the basement door slamming. Weird. But things escalated when my father died in the house suddenly, and that's when things got scary. I went into the basement, and I got scratched on the back of the shoulder. Twice I took showers in the upstairs bathroom, and there were handprints in the steam on the mirror, and they were huge, like my father's sort of. Bear in mind that the first time it happened, I thoroughly cleaned the mirror, and then it happened again. Weirder still, twice my phone flew off my bedside table to the opposite wall, and the next day, I couldn't believe it, there were recordings that sounded guttural and pretty much not understandable. I didn't put them there, I have no idea where they came from. The recordings were so creepy, and one of them almost sounded like someone was saying something and then remind me or something. Like I said, guttural and weird. Also, one time my fiancé and I were in bed at night, just lying there, and my brother was playing Xbox Live with a headset on in the next room over, and I know for a fact it wasn't him pranking me because I could hear him in a Black Ops match the whole time, but while we were lying there chatting. All of a sudden our bedroom door began almost rattling off its hinges like someone was pounding on the door for like 10 seconds straight. That was terrifying. Not to mention that the sound of someone walking up and down stairs escalated to what sounded like someone stomping heavily up and down stairs, sometimes all night long when no one else was home. Furthermore, my fiancé and I blessed the house after the door incident, so we opened all windows and doors starting at the basement and working up while chanting and casting herbs and salt around. And as we worked our way up the upstairs stairs, we found it very difficult to breathe, and my husband got pushed from behind and nearly fell downstairs. After we pushed through and finished, the house felt lighter. It felt better, it didn't feel cold, sad, and hostile. Until 3 days later. When I walked into the basement to get something from the deep freezer, I suddenly felt like I was being watched. The air was cold and eerily still. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination since I hadn't seen or heard anything unusual in 3 days. But when I turned to return upstairs, there was a thing on the ground, and to this day that is the scariest thing I've encountered. It was on the floor and grayish brown and so frickin' weird looking, like not even human really, and it was reaching for my foot, and I screamed and ran upstairs, practically shoving my fiancé out of the house. And he was like, "What's wrong? You seem pale and agitated. Could you please explain what happened?" And as we stood outside so I could tell him what happened, we literally watched as something that same color walked from one window to the door window and then disappeared. And he freaked out too. It wasn't 48 hours after that when we moved out and into his parents' house to get away from it. Now finally, the weirdest thing is that I'd never had issues with my cell phone until the haunting escalated and the recordings were left on it along with pictures of the handprints and the steam, etc. One day, not long after I'd gathered evidence, my phone randomly began power cycling and fried out, taking all my evidence with it. Now I know this sounds insane, but I swear to you that is the scariest place on God's green earth, and I have never been back for more than a few minutes at a time until the house sold in 2023. I just kind of want to know what everyone thinks that might be. Thank you so much for your time. This sounds fake and dumb, but I swear it's real. I remember back around 2020. I was gaming in my room, and the door to my room is upstairs just to my right while I'm on the game. My little brother and I were sharing a room at the time. I looked to my right at the door at some point, and it was very slightly creaked open, where I saw what I thought was my little brother smiling deviously through the crack, to which I quickly said, "I can see you, dipshit," and he didn't respond, so I stood up to start walking to the door, and as I looked closer, I thought I saw his eyes were completely black. I cannot describe the feeling I had the moment after I thought I saw that, and I backed away and screamed his name and heard him from downstairs shouting, "Yeah?" And I focused my eyes more after backing away. And it just ducking disappeared. I slowly walked towards the door and opened it more, and there was nothing behind the crack that could have looked like him with black eyes. I then ran downstairs as fast as I could, and sure enough, he was there, and he didn't have any contacts he could have put on. He was 6 years old, so there's no way he could have put them on. It really scares the shit out of me, and it scared him just as much as me when I told him. I was upstairs, just lying down, like I had just gotten into bed, when my stepdad called my name from the bottom of the stairs. I called back. "What?" He called my name again. And it just kept going on. Finally I got annoyed and thought, why is he not telling me what he wants or coming up here? I threw the blankets off me and got out of bed to go downstairs. I yelled, "What?" one last time, annoyed and mad that I had to get up and go see what he wanted. And it was weird. It was like you could feel the air, tone change. His voice changed, and it started screaming my name over and over. It was extremely loud. It sounded like two voices came from one source. One sounded like an old lady, and one sounded like pure evil. Like when people are possessed in the movies. I immediately froze and was like, oh shit, that is not my stepdad. Otherworldly popped into my brain, and I turned around and ran and jumped into my bed and hid under my covers. I thought my parents would have heard it and run up to check on me, but apparently they didn't, and I don't know how. It was probably only 10 to 15 seconds of screaming my name, but it felt like forever. I was scared if I called for anyone, it would fly up the stairs and get me. I couldn't go downstairs because obviously it was down there. I couldn't go out on the balcony because it had a screen. So I just hid under the covers. And it stopped. And nothing happened after that. It's just like silence. No footsteps leaving. No, nothing. Scared the shit out of me. But I stayed under the covers till I fell asleep. I didn't disclose the incident to anyone until 7 years later. Whatever it was followed me from that house and ducked with me until my late teenage years, and it finally stopped. I will never ever forget it. Even though they've torn down the house, I still have nightmares about it. I live in a graveyard. The title sounds super cheesy, but it's absolutely true. I also apologize in advance for the incredibly long story, But we've lived in this house for almost 8 years now, there's a lot to share. Our neighborhood sits on the original town cemetery from the 1800s. In the 70s, when they built the neighborhood, they only removed the graves, they needed to put in foundations and the sewer system. We didn't know that until we'd been living here for 3 or 4 years, but when I found out, it explained many things. While we were still in the process of moving in and hadn't even spent the first night in the house, I heard 2 little kids talking. I heard it clear as day, a girl probably around 10 or 12 and a little boy who sounded no older than 5. I only have 2 brothers, both younger than me but still older than either of those kids sounded. It sounded like any younger siblings playing, and because it sounded so normal, I can't remember what was said. Obviously the first thing I did was call out to them, and the playing stopped. I never heard them leave. I searched the house, and no one was inside, everyone was in the backyard putting together our swing set. I told my mom what I'd heard, and of course she didn't believe me. I dropped it, and we moved on. Months later I'm in my room, trying to sleep, when I roll over and see the reflection of a girl in my TV screen. I realized I was seeing her back, long curly blonde hair, and an 1800s blue dress. Somehow in my sleep-deprived brain I thought it was my own life-size doll and ignored it and went back to sleep. It was definitely not, wrong color, and the doll was facing the TV, so I would have seen the face reflected, not the back of her head that was against the wall. I don't tell my mom because that didn't work last time. After that, stuff starts moving around. Things fall off the stairs that are carpeted, the lights around the house turn off and on at random, and I can hear people walking around all the time. Still, my mother does not believe me, which is really stupid because she believes in ghosts. I affectionately name the ghost girl Lizzie because it feels right, Ike. I'm not afraid of her or anything. Finally, one day I'm out with my friends doing teenager stuff at like 11 p.m., and my mom calls me. Tell Lizzie not to scare the shit out of me. Turns out she'd gotten up to use the bathroom, and when she went back to bed, she'd seen a black orb hovering over her side of the bed. When she saw it, it quickly exited via the ceiling, and then she called me. Not long after that, we found the local news articles about our neighborhood and the cemetery. We also find out that during a flood one year, one particular casket kept popping back up, and it had to be moved. Many neighbors still have headstones visible in their yards. We're horrified because we definitely noticed some weirdly flat stones out near our garden and one only 5 or 6 feet from the fruit trees we planted. So now we all accept that we live with a ghost or two. Weird stuff happens all the time. They stopped throwing stuff off the stairs, but now they show up in our Xbox Connect, turn sinks on, occasionally knock stuff over, and sometimes I hear them talking faintly. I haven't seen either of them since the first time, but I know they're still around. We treat them like family, talk to them, offer snacks, and leave toys out to play with. Life is weird, and new people in the house never take long to notice. Also lately I've been seeing a shadow cat hanging around. We have 2 cats already, but neither of them can disappear through walls, so there's that. Thanks for listening if you made it to the end. I have so many stories about our otherworldly guests, but this is long enough already. It might seem weird, but I swear it's a true story. I was still living at my dad's house. I was about 16, 17 years old. The story began on the day we visited the house, which still gives me chills. We were doing a house tour with the property seller, from a company, when my dad told me, "This will be your room." As soon as I entered the room, I knew I would never sleep there. I had that weird feeling, no way I'm sleeping here. Finally, my dad bought the house. The first night, I slept in that particular room, and I actually haven't been able to sleep. I did not believe in ghosts, still not sure, but there was just something about this room I wasn't able to explain, just a strong bad feeling. I'm not someone who has ever been scared by this kind of stuff. The day after, I told my dad I would never sleep in that room again, and he saw I was dead serious. He knew I wasn't the kind of guy to care about this stuff, but actually I did at that time. So he decided to build me a new room in the giant basement. The room was designed with new walls and other features. The room didn't exist before we built it. A week or 2 went by, and then I started to hear voices in my imagination. It was just strange. Then, I started to hear an unstable table knocking softly on the wall for no particular reason, and doors that I knew I closed were open when I went to the bathroom at night. I told my dad, and he started to make fun of me by opening doors and knocking on the basement door, saying it wasn't him. My best friend once came, and he felt something strange too and didn't want to come back to sleep after, even when he was drunk. It was worse. He was telling me things like, "No effing way I'm sleeping in that basement again." After a month or so, I started having sleep paralysis on a weekly basis. Scared the F out of me, TBH. I never saw anything more than my empty room, though. Actually, I never saw something, always strange feelings and doors that had been opened, and creepy voices in my head. I was a serious hockey player with no drugs or mental problems. One day, I was at my girlfriend's house, and I was talking to her about it. Her mom heard some of what I was saying and came immediately. She was some kind of medium, or I don't know what. She listened to me and told me she would come to see what was going on. It's after that discussion I really started to get scared, because before that I was convinced there was a physical reason behind all of it. So she came, and I will always remember the look she gave me, strong FKG chills again. She immediately got out and told me, there's one guy who's not happy, and he carries a heavy weight on his foot, and there's another guy who only wants to make jokes, I'll take care of that. She also told me some things that were probably happening in the house, they did, without me having told anybody about it. From that moment, nothing ever happened again. I asked her what she did, and she told me, I went to my bedroom, made them come here, and then I hunted them away from my house. She was living at least 30 kilometers from my house. I know it sounds weird, but the fact that nothing ever happened after creeps me out. I would like to add the fact that I did some research afterwards. There was only one owner before my dad, and he confirmed to me that he built the house, and nothing tragic ever happened in it. Nobody died in it. I would also add that I'm French, so probably you had difficulties understanding me, I'm sorry. I thought you guys could help me understand what happened in this house. Like from the moment she left the house and did her thing, I didn't know she had chased them from her house, nothing ever happened again. No voices, no sleep paralysis, no doors, no shaking unstable table, no creepy feelings, nothing at all. Still creeps me out just thinking about it. I was at my grandmother's house when I was 7 years old for her 20th anniversary with her husband, not related to me. There were a whole bunch of people there, some of whom I knew, most of whom I didn't. It was quite the blast for the most part. We had a barbecue later in the day when everyone, myself included, arrived. We enjoy casual gatherings, hence, barbecue and beer are our go-to for celebration. That part is not so relevant, however. Once the whole thing was more or less over, everyone started driving/walking home, some people, my mom/dad, a few cousins/aunts/uncles/unknown people, decided to sleep in at Granny's place. Some occupied the bedrooms. Some grabbed furniture. The place was basically full on both floors other than, 3 couches in the basement. It must have been at least 1 a.m., and all the kids were sleeping except for me and my 2 little cousins. We had a fun little challenge about staying up later than the rest and sneaking a sip of beer, much to the chagrin of our parents. My mother managed to negotiate a titanic deal, women and children only, for the 3 couches, 2 large brown ones and 1 smaller black one, in the basement. My mom got me a spot with one of my other cousins and his mother. I slept on the smaller black couch, my mother slept on one of the larger couches, and my cousin/his mother slept on the other large couch. Everyone else had to bail, unfortunately for them, including most of the men. Now to the relevant bit. One of my aunts had come down to get us tucked in and close the door for us. It's important to emphasize, the stairs up to the basement door are in the corner of the basement near the front yard. The left arm of my couch is parallel to those stairs. I have pushed the right arm of my couch up against a pillar. I can see the front yard directly outside the window. As she is going up to the door, I swear she just stops at the first step and stares at me. I can clearly see her face and body while she is just pushed up against the inclining wall with her head and left torso peeking. She's just staring at me. Then I hear the door to the basement close. The only person who would have closed the door was my aunt, but she was right there. She didn't have a look of malevolence or anger. It's like she just paused. By this point I'm too scared to call my mother, who is right behind me. Hell, I'm too scared to cover my head or move my eyes. I'm just having a stare off with my aunt. Nothing happened, BTW. I don't have any and then she. Story. I eventually fell asleep somehow and woke up as normal. I didn't tell anyone. There was no specific reason for my silence, I simply didn't feel like sharing. When I grew up a little and asked my aunt, she seemed astonished. What the hell was I seeing? My experience with hauntings. I've lived in many houses during my lifetime, and some of those homes are older than they appear. If you do research before you buy a home, great, you are a smart cookie and wish to avoid a haunted house. If you're like my mom and want to live as cheaply as you can, well, you can guess the result. I was about 9 years old when I had my first encounter with a ghost. I don't remember that much, sadly. I did look up the history of the house and found out that the previous owners had many pets who died thanks to the local coyotes. The house I remember was the one on Fish Point Road. It was a nice apartment with multiple rooms and a bad poltergeist. I would always wake up to the thing banging the bathroom door. I think the time was 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. Every day the poltergeist would slam the bathroom door. My mother tried her normal tactics of smudging and placing protective charms. Sadly, to her efforts, they didn't do a damn thing but anger it more. My worst memory from that place is when I was playing Call of Duty with my little brother. He was winning a round when we heard a huge crash in the living room. We ran out to see the flat screen TV on the floor and the movies all over the place. My stepfather came out. He was furious about what happened and thought it was that did it. He believed us when the couch moved to the middle of the room and the potted plant flew across the kitchen. He dragged us outside and called my mother right away. The poltergeist must hate plants. Because when my mom came home and when we went back inside, all her herbs, flowers, and mini trees were all over the floor. Dirt covered the walls, pots shattered all over the floor, and the whole place was a mess. My stepfather never cared for her beliefs, and to be honest, I don't think he liked her rituals and charms in the first place. He and my mom were arguing for hours after that. He believed she summoned the poltergeist there. Nowadays I believe two things, that she probably did summon the poltergeist out of spite towards my stepfather, or it was attracted by the negativity caused by my mental illness and my mom's distaste for my stepfather's biological daughter and son. I don't know the previous owners, and when I decided to dig into the home's history. The home's past is clean. I didn't find any deaths or accidents in its history. I plan to move back there someday and see if the poltergeist is still there, but either way I hope my experience will help others who have a poltergeist. So if you have a door slamming poltergeist, don't use the same tactics my mother did. Have a real Wiccan or priest bless your home. An angry poltergeist is just as dangerous as any demon. I grew up living in a church. My family and I lived in a church for almost 30 years. To explain a bit about this, my parents met at church, and when they got married, they were asked if they wanted to be the custodians of the church and live in the pastor's quarters above the church since they didn't have any other place to live, being young and poor. They accepted. The layout of the building was more or less like this. You would come through the front door of the church from the street, walk through the middle of the church, and go to the back, where there was a door and a set of stairs going into the pastor's quarters. It was a tiny one-bedroom apartment where the 5 of us shared that one bedroom. My parents had 3 kids, including me, and we had 2 dogs by the time I was a teenager. The apartment also had a terrace and a laundry room next to it. There was always weird activity going on in the building for as long as I can remember. All 5 of us experienced, either separately or collectively, paranormal activity. Such as hearing steps walking towards us, voices and noises, a dark presence that made us feel tense and cold, etc. One night, my dad was away. He would travel sometimes for work, and we were having dinner with my mom and brothers. Suddenly, we hear slow steps coming up the stairs that led to the church downstairs. The steps sounded like high heels from a woman. Very slowly, it walked up the stairs, walked into our kitchen/dining/living room area, passed behind us, and led into our bedroom. We all froze and looked at each other, and my mother asked us if we heard that. We nodded. My oldest brother, to keep us calm, and him being the most rational out of all of us, grabbed a knife and decided to look through the apartment and through the church. Of course, he didn't find anything, and it helped lighten the mood since my other brother and I were younger. Another time, I came home from buying groceries with my mother and found my middle brother crying in a corner, terrified, and he said he was playing on the computer when he heard steps coming towards him. Another time, I heard voices in the middle of the night coming from the church. I was in bed, and I couldn't move. I felt like a presence was staring at me from the laundry room. This makes sense since there were 2 windows that sort of connected from the terrace to our bedroom. I later asked my brother if he had been downstairs in the church talking with someone, and he said he had been away all night. The days of most activity were Thursdays since those were praying days at the church. They would also do funerals there. A lady once passed away during a service, but CPR brought her back to life. What I mean is, there's lots of spiritual activity in that place. My middle brother would always have the weirdest dreams, and we would all experience sleep paralysis quite regularly. One night I was at a friend's birthday party at a bar, and my mom called me completely terrified, asking me if I could come home because she was all alone and she heard how someone ran up the stairs to our apartment and had turned on a temporary light that had a timer, which would light up the church for about 30 seconds so you could walk through it without having to turn on all the lights. She was hysterical. My mom would always anoint the apartment and the stairs, trying to keep whatever those things were at bay. My mom always experienced the worst things. She's always had, like, that sixth sense. She's felt things touching her or whispering in her ear at night. When we finally moved after 28 years of living there, I was 20 at the time. We never experienced that level of activity again. The new pastors decided to move in and take the apartment. They only lasted a month there. They asked my mother if we had ever felt any presence in there or that somebody touched us even though you couldn't see anyone, and my mom's response to him was, "Oh, you already felt them, huh? We lived with them for years." Even though I still feel sensitive to paranormal things, I've never again experienced the panic I felt in that place. Definitely a portal to another dimension. There are many more experiences I haven't written in here, like seeing a black dog running past me when walking through the church or my dogs barking at random walls or corners. I've never shared it online before, but I figured you guys would appreciate some real stories. I swear these are all true. So when I was a kid, I don't know what year it was, but I was really into Scooby-Doo, so that phase was probably around 2009 to 2010. I visited my aunt and her kids, or some family that wasn't very close to us. Either way, we drove there and spent a few days hanging out. I remember they made me a Scooby-Doo bed and had a small chest of Scooby-Doo toys and stuffed animals. I was watching an old episode, I think, of the Super Mario Super Show that had an extra episode of the old show Dino Squad. I had fallen asleep, and I woke up wanting to get a cup of milk. I remember I had recently learned how to do it by myself, so I was confident I didn't need anyone. I remember walking through the hallway, which at night felt very long, and when I made it to the living room, the kitchen light was dim, and I remember it not being as bright as I thought it was. As I walked to the kitchen, I saw a movement toward the front door that was being illuminated by the dim kitchen light. Keep in mind no other light was on in the house. I looked over to see an 8-foot-tall shadow figure who appeared to be male. He had a big head of curly hair and a long nose. Long enough to see well with his large shadow. As I looked at him, he smiled, and his shadow disappeared into the air vent. Yes, his shadow went straight into the vent, not over it. And I freaked out and ran back to my room, where I woke up my grandma, who was my guardian at the time, and she told me to go to bed. I later learned the house was built next to an old, ancient native burial ground. It was an odd figure to even think about native people, but I don't know. It was strange, and I've never forgotten that night. It's one of the few memories I swear I can remember like it just happened. I had a creepy encounter with a spirit entity. One night, on November 29, 2022, to be exact, I was out late night driving in my car when I realized I couldn't find my house key, so I was stuck outside. My grandparents live nearby and have this old barn that used to have horse stables in it, which now has a trampoline inside it and blankets and all sorts of things. Luckily that building is unlocked, so I decided to sleep there for the night, as I have done so in the past. I got to the barn and taped the door with duct tape from the inside completely shut so the wind wouldn't open it. I live in the Midwest. There are also blankets in there, so I decided to sleep in the middle of the trampoline all wrapped up. As I'm dozing off, I hear weird scratching against the door and almost what sounded like a banging noise, which caught me off guard. Usually I take it as wind since it gets pretty intense, but the noise felt like it was coming from inside of the barn after a few seconds. I didn't hear any noise from the tape, so there definitely wasn't anything on it that could have been inside. Then it turned into noises of faint footsteps. There is a staircase right next to where the trampoline is, and the footsteps began going up the stairs slowly. The presence I felt from this thing was so strong I could feel where it was and how tall it was exactly, and I'd say it was roughly 6 feet, maybe taller. But it felt more like an aura than a person, if that makes any sense. At this point I'm shitting my pants, and something in the back of my mind is telling me not to look towards whatever it was, so I tried to remain as still as I could. The noises stop halfway up the stairs, and now I can feel this haunting presence that I've never felt before in my life. In my mind it looked like a shadowy figure holding something and looking down at me from the staircase. If that's not scary enough, I don't know what is LOL. I then found it harder to breathe, and I tried convincing myself that nothing was there and that I was just imagining things. A few long minutes go by with this thing staring at me, and I'm almost ready to turn around and look at it, but it begins to shift positions as I hear creaking noises from the step that it's on. It then lifts whatever it was holding up over its head, and it doesn't leap like a normal human being, but it felt more like a direct and diagonal thrust of energy right from the stairs onto me, and when it hits me, I feel this cold sensation throughout my body that made me shiver and cringe. Weirdly, shortly after that there was only silence, no more sounds, no more feelings of anything. I felt safe. And in the morning I felt really drowsy and out of it. Definitely one of the weirdest and unexplainable things that have ever happened to me. I've never had any other experiences with spirits or anything of that nature, but I would say I do believe in that type of stuff, so that's my story. If anyone can tell me any theories or their opinions on this encounter on what it could have been, I would really like to hear them. I would also appreciate hearing from anyone who has similar stories to mine. One last thing I'd like to add because I think it would be useful to know. I had a spiritual awakening and other weird things happening around this time, so I was thinking it could have been related somehow. There's something in my backyard. My family has been renting out a house since I was around 6 or 7. We know that it's haunted, as it sits on some old farmland that burned to the ground, taking the farmer's daughter, and I believe, son. I don't have much communication with the son, but he's about 4 and sits in our bathtub. The daughter, however, is very active. Her name is Elizabeth, and she's around 15. I and my mother believe she is the watcher of the house, as she's very, very protective of certain things. There are a lot of other spirits as well. There's a little poltergeist boy, around 7 or 8, who likes to follow me around. He likes to sing at night and has thrown toys at me before. He's called Gabriel. However, this isn't about them. Recently, we got a pet dog. We don't have a doggy door or anything, so whenever she needs to go pee or something, we have to unlock the door and wait for her to be done. Now this wasn't a problem for a while. I'd take her out in the day, and normally my dad or mom would at night. However, I've been staying up late with assignments these last few weeks and have had to take our dog out to pee late at night. I should also mention that there were, supposedly, witch burnings on the land our house sits on. I don't know how true this is, though, as it's just something Elizabeth would whisper to me from time to time. Anyways, as I said, I've been letting the dog out late at night, and every time I can feel something watching me. Now, as I live with many spirits, I brushed it off as Gabe or Lizzie following me and watching me, as they both really like my cat, so I just assumed they like the dog as well, but recently I've been waking up with this sort of morning sadness and dread. Now, I have no one to mourn, and I have never had anyone to mourn, so I don't know where this sadness is coming from. As well as I don't feel dread often, normally it's when something bad is coming my way, and even then it's rare for me to feel dread. Last night, I woke up at 3 in the morning practically bawling my eyes out. My dad had gone downstairs for something to drink, and as I knew he was awake, I went downstairs to talk to him. He goes and sits on the couch and turns the TV on while I make some tea, and as I was doing so, I could feel whatever had been watching me when I had been letting the dog out again, but this time I knew it wasn't Gabe or Lizzie, and no one else really goes in the kitchen. I couldn't see Gabe anywhere, and I knew that Lizzie was watching over the new kitten we had, as I'd seen her standing near the bed. So I just brushed it off as nerves because of how I'd woken up. Until I saw it. Our back door has a frosted window, and I swear on my life there was this inhumanly tall, stick-like shadow figure standing on the other side. Staring. Blankly staring. I rush out and tell my dad, and he watches me panic and break down. I did not sleep for the rest of the night. I've been trying to talk to Lizzie or any of the spirits, but they keep ignoring me, and it's not like they've just disappeared because I've seen them all walk into my room with these sad, long faces and stare at me while shaking their heads. Not even Gabriel, who is always by my side, talked to me. I had to let the dogs out a little while ago. I didn't. I refused to open the door. My mother yelled at me and said I was overthinking, yet I know deep down she's just trying to brush it off as it being a displaced spirit. We get those often. Yet, it doesn't really explain anything. Like, at all. When we first moved in, we had an old outhouse. We were going to renovate it into a playhouse for me and my siblings. For some reason my parents decided against it. When I inquired, my mom simply responded, "There was something in there." It's probably a good time to mention that we are not allowed in the backyard, and I've finally figured out why. Because there's something out there. Something is in my backyard, and I'm pretty sure it wants me gone because it knows I can see it. It knows I know. I'm absolutely terrified. Feeling unsettled around the house. Recently I've been experiencing some strange things here and there in the house. I'm 15 and sleep in a room away from my parents. Occasionally when I sleep, I feel a presence lurking near the door, and on those days the room is especially dark. We live in an apartment complex that is well guarded and always buzzing. People go out for walks well into the night. Well, anyways, like I said, some nights the room feels especially dark and unsettling. A couple of days ago, I was sitting in the living room studying, and I moved the table away from the wall to study. After completing my study, I made my way to my room, where I once again moved the table to remain in contact with the wall. After a while, I hear the sound of heavy furniture being moved in the living room, but I ignore it. Then my mom comes back, I was home alone then, and asks me why I hadn't moved the table back to its place, and I swear I did. I come out and see that the table had moved from the way I had placed it while studying. I thought that was very odd and ignored it. Fast forward to now. Last night, I slept exceptionally early at around 7:30 p.m., a departure from my usual habit of sleeping at around 2 a.m. on weekends. I don't understand why it was so unlike me, as I felt very drained despite coming back from school early and not going out afterward. I first woke up around 10:15 p.m. and debated whether to stay up or go back to sleep. I was also extremely hungry at that point since I hadn't eaten since lunch that day. Anyways, the whole night I felt someone sleep beside me, but I didn't bother because sometimes my parents would occasionally sleep beside me if I was feeling down or sick. Yesterday I was down a bit because I was really upset about losing a scholarship thingy, but anyways, I asked my parents in the morning, and both denied entering my room at all. I don't know how to explain these recent things going around. I'm not scared, really, I just feel weird, you know? If it helps, my grandmother passed away in the same house over a year and a half ago, but the presence wasn't threatening in any way. Has anybody had similar experiences? My town dates back to centuries before America even existed. I am from a place called Cumbria. My grandmother's house is about as old as America, and it used to be a pub. The house is haunted by various ghoulish beings of ghostly means. Everyone in my family has seen a little girl sitting at the edge of the bed in one room. We all swapped rooms a lot when I was a kid, and it's not like it was all in the same time period or after hearing about it. We didn't come out about it until it randomly came up. Not everyone has seen my ghosts, though. When I was a small kid, I had a ghost friend that used to live in the house my mom rented at the time. He would tell me he didn't like the furniture where it was because it wasn't where it all was when he was alive. Apparently I would have fits and swing from the curtains and need to get woken up from these sleepwalk sessions where I would scream about moving the furniture and taking down the curtains. We moved house after I said John, ghost's name, had moved into my mom's room. He didn't follow, and there wasn't another incident after we moved. There are also the tall ones who stand over my bed while I'm trying to sleep. Sometimes I will feel hands on me, breathing on my nape. Stuff like that. Considering the place was an extremely old pub, I don't doubt some of the ghosts are touchy for young adults in bed. Like I said though, my whole town is haunted. The cemetery is creepy enough. There was a man whose life was a mess. He had debts and had no loved ones, and he just couldn't live, so he went up to the cemetery, slung a rope over a tree branch, and hung himself there. There was also a guy who slit his own throat in the railway tunnel going underneath the cemetery. He can sometimes be spotted in the tunnel while riding the trains. I'd vouch more for a murderer with friends in high places than slitting your throat. What an awful way to voluntarily die. There was a guy who was hit by an automobile, as said in the news article from the time, shows how old the case is, and launched from his bike. He has a grave site a short drive away from me. I think he was some sort of religious worker. There's the case of Donald Campbell. He broke the water level speed record on his speedboat, the Bluebird. His attempt ended in tragedy, though. After a long career of smashing records on boat and land, his boat flipped over and sank, killing him and leaving his body trapped inside the Bluebird underwater for a good 50 years. There's a strange feeling when you are going through the countryside or to the mere. And going through the cemetery feels unsettling. My ghost story from 2019. I used to stay over at my friend's house many nights a week. After COVID-19 first hit, my schooling was online only. I was sometimes the only one in the basement on my laptop doing schoolwork or playing games. I would always have a weird feeling, like I was being watched, and I would get cold shivers. I was an all-nighter, so I would be awake while my friend would sleep at night. Whenever I was downstairs alone, I would take a shower in the basement bathroom, and when I was in the shower, I would keep hearing someone knocking on the bathroom door. This kept happening. I swear one of the times I was in the shower, I heard a female voice whisper to me. There was this one night I was sick of all the knocks. I ran out of the shower with a towel on, thinking it was my friend. There was nobody there. My friend was also overweight, so I would have seen him go up the stairs or even heard his footsteps. Also, my friend was sleeping in his bedroom 2 floors up. Not too long after that, one night I was sleeping in the guest room on the 3rd floor of his house, having a bad nightmare, taking place at this friend's house I was currently sleeping in. I was on the 2nd floor, which was the main floor. There was this old lady dressed in 1800s clothing, with pale skin and furious-looking eyes, chasing me. I was pounding on the front door of the house, swearing, but I was unable to escape. I was able to open the door. I woke up from the nightmare. I went downstairs and checked the time. It was 2 a.m. As soon as I went back to sleep, the old lady entity screamed in my ear. It sounded demonic. I felt the pain in my ear from that scream, and I didn't go back to sleep that morning. I told my friend and his parents. They all thought I was crazy. I knew there was something off about that house. The tracks are near my house. I've been dying to share at least one of my strange stories here, so here it goes. This happened a while back, I'd say somewhere in my teenage years, as I can't remember the exact time frame, so bear with me on my rough recount of the events that took place that day. There are some abandoned train tracks up the street from where I live. It's a hot spot for many. Whether you're an angsty teen or an older couple looking for a nice walk, the tracks were perfect for it. The downside is, it was also a hot spot for those who dabble in the sketchy, unexplainable things. People who play games with the unknown. Sometimes walking into the tracks felt like entering another world. A not so peaceful one. You can feel eyes on you and catch things out of the corner of your eye. Strange noises that make you overthink your surroundings. Maybe you brushed it off as your imagination, but some half of you knew there was something more to it. Something malevolent. One day, an ex-best friend, we'll call her friend H, and I decided we wanted to walk to the abandoned tracks. This was normal for us. We really enjoyed the trips to the tracks despite how strange they could be at times, and it was a nice day, nearing summer, and we were high in spirit, welcoming the warm weather. We planned to go later in the day but before nightfall. Something to note about these tracks, in particular, is that you absolutely do not want to enter them at night. Our rule was if the sun began to set, we stayed out. The track turned into a whole other place at night, a very dangerous place. Any weird events that would happen in there would get so much worse at night. It was anything but welcoming. So anyways, we planned to head out about 4 or 5 that day and stay until late 6 to early 7, depending on where the sun was by that time. Another friend B asked to join us on our adventure, and we agreed it'd be fine. Now I love this friend, she's been in my life since I was 5, but she can be overwhelming at times due to her difficulty with confrontation. I'm going to preface either of those. Friend B is her, and she and her boyfriend would argue about anything and everything. So as we got ready to go, friend B ended up on the phone with her boyfriend, and their convo went south fast. I and my friend H continued to get ready and tried to ignore the yelling. We knew that this might hold us up, but we still had plenty of time, so it was no worry, more of just an annoyance and the chill vibes, if anything. Before we knew it, time was passing quickly, and friend B was still arguing with her boyfriend, who apparently now wanted to join. Along with my longtime best friend, friend B's brother. It took a lifetime for friend B's boyfriend to show up, after they were done screaming at each other over the phone, of course. By this point, the sun is now starting to set, and my friend H and I are getting kind of iffy about even going now. Knowing how it gets towards the night, it begins to sound like a bad idea. Unfortunately, we stuck with the plan despite the setback since everyone else was still game, and we didn't want to ruin it for everyone else. Looking back, I kind of wish I said, duck it, and stayed home. Who cares what they think, right? Sadly, I'm known to be a people pleaser, so even though it didn't feel like the right move, we went anyways. It wasn't dark when we left for the tracks, but the sun was below the trees. It was definitely beyond my comfort zone. From the moment we walked a couple of feet in, it felt off. We could hear what sounded like children playing and screaming. We ignored it at first because the tracks are in my neighborhood, with backyards and houses right behind the fences at the entrance. The best way I can describe it is there are tracks that lay directly across the street, and you can go left or right and pretty much disappear away from society the further you walk. One side is so overgrown that it is impossible to walk on. However, the side we go on is where some of the locals walk, the side that has houses on either side for the first 50 to 100 feet. The further you walk in, the more the houses grow distant from the tracks, and you're met with mainly woods on either side of you. The left side has a lot more trees, and you can get lost in it if you wander off the tracks and aren't paying attention to your surroundings. Back to it, we are walking in. We can hear children screaming and occasionally laughing. We're chatting. I'm trying not to be too freaked out about coming in this late and playing it lighthearted, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't already feel something off. Like a thickness in the air. Then we realized that all of the screaming sounds weird. As we moved further away from the neighborhood, the screams grew louder and no longer sounded fun or like children. It sounds more like a woman screaming. This made us stop dead and look at each other. I remember mentioning that I didn't think it was a good idea, but for whatever reason, we decided to keep moving. Eventually, the noise stopped. It went from screaming to eerily quiet. This is where it gets fuzzy for me, so I apologize if it gets a little difficult to follow, but I will try my best to explain everything that occurred. Friend B and her boyfriend started arguing about something again, and my best friend began wandering a little further into the tracks. I and friend H started talking among ourselves about possibly leaving since this experience wasn't taking any fun turns anytime soon, and we were definitely fully freaked out at this point. The vibe in the air alone had me watching everything around me. I didn't want to be there in the first place, but now I really didn't want to be there. I tried yelling to the two, arguing about how we should leave, and it doesn't feel safe here. They barely acknowledged me, though. This frustrated me. I could care less about their problems, and I felt that it was stupid to be fighting in a place like this. I walked a little further with them, and we didn't even make it to the spot we were intending. There's a spot that everyone liked to chill at. That spot was the waterfall. It was a stream that led into not a big body of water but enough of a creek to make this beautiful waterfall. It might seem silly, but we enjoyed leaving the tracks to sit on the rocks by the waterfall. I'd say it was maybe another 50 feet before we got to our destination that things got next level horrifying. We stood there for a minute or two while friend B and her boyfriend continued their bullshit. I had enough at this point, and I told them that we were turning around and leaving, as it was not safe, and we weren't enjoying this trip anyway. Out of nowhere she went quiet and randomly sat down on the tracks. I didn't like this one bit because I had already said enough is enough, and we aren't spending any more time here. The place was getting heavier by the second, and things felt more and more wrong the longer we stood there. I poked at them again that we're leaving. I don't like being pushy or controlling, but I didn't want to leave my friends there either, and I genuinely felt like something bad could happen if we didn't leave as soon as possible. While friend B is being dramatic and sulking on the tracks, I made the mistake of looking off into the trees on the left side. Even though there was no fog or anything obscuring my vision, I was having a hard time seeing into them for some reason. Then I saw it. Or more like them. I assure you that I'm not intruding, I'm genuinely observing what appeared to be children in the distance, positioned close to the scattered trees. Some were peering out, while others stood near the trees. I guess there were at least 6. They were a mix of boys and girls, all dressed in white. The thing that really got me was the fact that they lacked eyes. Like deep, dark pits in their faces. They were watching us from the trees. Now this really sent me into panic mode, and without warning I grabbed friend H's arm and told her, "We have to leave now." With pure fear in my tone, we yelled out that we were going now, and we didn't wait for them at this point. We warned them and then started booking it. I can't tell if it was my mind playing tricks on me after what I had just seen, but I could swear I heard footsteps on each side of us following long before my other friends caught up. The air had been still before, but now the trees and other growth were whipping in the wind. Again, I'm not sure if my fear was overwhelming me, but shortly after taking off, I turned to look behind me and caught a glimpse of a dark figure in the middle of the tracks. It was only there for a brief moment, but it undoubtedly accelerated my sprint. The day unfolded so swiftly that it's challenging to recall all the specifics and their locations, yet the terror was palpable. I knew something bad was there, but I was not expecting to see what I saw that day. I will note, as previously stated, there are some really strange people who go there, and if you go in deep enough down the tracks, far past the waterfall, there are these 2 large stone walls that sit on both the left and right sides of the tracks. Not sure why they are there or what purpose they served at one point, but they are covered in satanic shit. The tracks that sit there are burned to almost nothing, as if people light a lot of fires there. I've done a few there myself, but nothing strange or satanic, just simple little campfires. I've had a couple of strange experiences in between those walls, but I won't get into that right now since this is already more lengthy than I meant it to be. Weird shit happens within these tracks, and I wouldn't be shocked if a few things have been purposely summoned. Funny enough, little side story, I'll quickly discuss it because I believe it's relevant. My ex-boyfriend struggles with his mental health a lot, and he went there alone one night. He wanted to sit in silence at the waterfall to try and clear his head. He's not like me, he's a skeptic. He doesn't believe in the paranormal like I do. He told me he was sitting there in his thoughts and heard and felt children singing around him. It felt as if he was surrounded. He didn't turn around to look, he just ignored it and summed it up to his mind being in a terrible state. I hadn't told him about my experience with the children I saw, but when he told me that, my blood ran cold. He still thinks he was having a psychotic moment, but I can't help but think it's related. Anyways, my friends caught up with us towards the entrance, and I could feel the air get light again. The wind stopped, and I could hear the streets again. I was still very shaken but ultimately felt much better to be out of that place. We went our separate ways afterwards. I and my friend H went back to my house and talked about the events. I don't remember if she saw what I saw, and since we don't talk anymore, I can't ask her, but it's something that's stuck with me since. I'm sure some of it can be chalked up to already being fearful knowing its history, but I fully believe I saw those children, and I don't think they were there as guidance but as a warning. I don't care if you don't believe me, I know this happened to me and my friends. If you have any ideas about what I saw that day, please share, as I can't find an answer for what entities could have been summoned there. I just know they are something I never want to run into again. When I was a kid, I saw a leprechaun. I, 23 years old, have no other explanation for what I saw in, I believe, first grade. I know this sounds dumb, but here's what happened. It was St. Patrick's Day, and we were making paper rainbows to hang up from the ceiling. As students finished their rainbows, the teacher came around and hung them up above us. She laid strands of iridescent tinsel on top of each of the rainbows, left to hang freely. After she had hung one up above my desk and continued around the room, and I was still neatly coloring mine in, I saw something flash by. I swear it was like Dash from The Incredibles. The iridescent tassels on the rainbow above me whisked and fluttered to my desk. I just stared at that area in disbelief, looking around to see if anyone else had noticed. I looked to the windows and the door only to see them shut. I looked at all the other tassels on the hung-up rainbows, and they weren't moving from any breeze. To this day, I'm not sure if I was imagining things, caught an optical illusion, or if I really saw what I think I saw. It's one of my most distinct memories. I don't really share this story with anyone because it makes me sound crazy. I, female, 23, just randomly remembered this incident happening to me when I was a child. I've told a few people about it, including my mom and my boyfriend, but mostly keep it to myself since it doesn't really come up in my mind that much. However, after watching some paranormal/demonic videos, I felt compelled to share my experience. When I was around 5 or 6, my dad bought his first house after we lived in an apartment for most of my young life, and when we moved in, things were mostly normal. The house would creak, but my dad chalked it up to being settling noises, since the house was newly built. It had no history, and we were the first family to move in there. I used to be fairly scared of paranormal and demonic instances. I had a few of them in my life previously, and I also had anxiety starting from a very young age, so any strange noise in the house would tip me off, and I'd become so scared I'd have to sleep in my dad's bed to fall back asleep. My dad obliged until my stepmom moved in and felt it was time I needed to learn self-soothing and stop coming into their bed whenever I got scared. I was around 8 or 9 at this time. One very specific night, something extremely scary happened. The worst part is, I don't even remember it. My parents will still swear to this day that it happened and are equally as puzzled as me that I have no recollection. What I remember is waking up at night sleeping on my stomach. I have no idea what time it was. I remember hearing 2 very distinct growling noises from under my bed. It wasn't like a dog growl or a human faking a growl, it was very primal, deep, and menacing, to say the least. For further clarification, we had no pets at this time, so there's no way it could have been a dog. But for some reason, in my sleepy state, I fell back asleep almost immediately. I just remember the growling, then almost blacking out. It's weird to me to think about because I know if I was conscious in that moment, I would have at the very least sat up and screamed. I was an easily scared child and still am as an adult. I suddenly remember awaking in my parents' bed and sitting up, not remembering how I made it there. They both sat up with me and asked if I was okay. I told them I was confused and tired. I apologized for somehow finding my way into their bed and got up to go back into my bedroom. My dad made me stop and turn around so he could look at the back of my leg, in my calf/hamstring area. I let him, and I remember him touching my leg there and being confused and silent. I asked what was wrong, and they told me that the night before, around 3 a.m., I woke up screaming and practically almost broke their door down, banging on it and begging to be let inside. They locked their door at night. Being parents, they of course immediately knew something was wrong and opened the door without hesitation. My dad told me I clung to him, still screaming and crying that there was a demon under my bed and it scratched me. I told him my leg was burning and insisted something had hurt me. He turned the lights on, and sure enough, we both recalled seeing a very distinct set of scratches on my leg. Space like human fingers, not like a cat scratch or a scrape from something. Intentional, red, raised scratches. My dad said he immediately investigated but couldn't find anything. I looked under the bed with a flashlight, opened my closet, and even walked around outside. Nothing. The house was locked, and so were my windows. They let me sleep in their bed because I was understandably inconsolable, and they didn't want me to sleep alone at that point anyway. My dad checked my leg and found that the scratches had disappeared. There was nothing there, nothing to prove anything happened. It still shocks me to this day to think I don't remember a single moment except for the growling. Like it's been deleted from my memory. It could have been traumatic enough that I blocked it out, but immediately? Indeed, I found myself confused about the situation the very next day, as if it had never happened. You could say I was just an anxious child with nightmares, but with both of my parents insisting it happened, I can't just downplay it and say nothing happened. It's a truly unexplainable event in my life. I'm interested in hearing your opinions on this matter. A few years ago, a family lived in my current house. It turns out that they were very involved in the issue of witchcraft and drug sales. In this house lived a woman, her 3 children, and her brother, who was involved in the sale and consumption of drugs. The man was already threatened with death by other drug dealers until one night, he left home, walked 2 streets, and got into a field to get high. The dealers caught him and shot him with a shotgun in the back. The drug dealers also threatened this man's family, warning them that if they didn't leave the neighborhood, they would suffer the same fate as him. The family, in less than 6 months, was already out of the neighborhood. They sold the house to my family. My family consists of my father and mother, currently separated, and this creates a lot of affection for the experiences I will tell, my 2 little brothers, and me, who am the oldest of the 3. We lived together there for 2 years. During those 2 years, my mother and I saw a man of 180 centimeters, who was dressed in white trousers and a blue t-shirt, but we didn't tell each other that we had seen him. After these 2 years, my parents separated. It was very hard and fought. The problem comes when my father's new girlfriend is a witch, a practitioner of Macumba, a type of black magic, and she, with her witchcraft, tries to do us wrong, almost killing us. I try to kill my mother with witchcraft with graveyard land. But my mother, thanks to other people who practice black magic, could be saved. After 1 year after the separation of my parents and 3 living in that house, we decided to move. My mother, my brothers, and I went 500 kilometers, on a beach, because an aunt of mine lives there. We were there for 2 months and came back because we learned that our father was occupying our house with his new girlfriend. He used our things, he planned to keep the house, so we returned. Then we learned that some neighbors saw her through the windows doing witchcraft inside our house. When we returned, they were gone. We returned to live in our house until today. It's been 9 years since we bought it and 8 years since my parents separated. The creepiness arrived when the ghost of the man we saw, our neighbors confirmed to us by the description that he was the former owner of the house, was transformed. It became a very dark shadow and appeared almost all the time. Cups flew alone, the PC chair rotated on its own during the night, and the light of my webcam turned on alone when I returned from the bathroom at night. The most disturbing thing is that I could see it more than anyone in my house. I saw him at dawn, opened the door of my room, and saw him walking in my mother's room. When I saw him, he ran towards me. He doesn't remember how many times the sun came out, and I kept crying out of fear. I saw him all the time. At the age of 16, I decided to move out of my bedroom. In my house there are 3 bedrooms, one is my mother's, and another we call the middle bedroom, because it is located between my mother's and mine. That it is in a very bad state talking about foundations, and the last room we call it the back bedroom, mine, and in this bedroom, the back bedroom, from where I write this experience. It was the room of the man who died here. From the previous owner of the house that died. At the age of 16, I decided to move out of my bedroom. In my house there are 3 bedrooms, one is my mother's, and another we call the middle bedroom, because it is located between my mother's and mine, that is in a very bad state talking about foundations. And the last room we call the back bedroom, mine, and in this bedroom, the back bedroom, is where I write this experience. It was the room of the man who died here. From the previous owner of the house that died. According to the neighbors, he practiced witchcraft in this room. When I moved to this one, something violently woke me up during the night, and when I awoke, the entire room had been turned upside down. I saw his dark shadow all over the room, he didn't love me there. During the winters the walls turn white with moisture, and out of nowhere hands and faces printed on them appear. It's been 3 years that I've used this room. And I think he got used to me because I repeatedly yelled at him. That won't bother you anymore. However, it continued to appear. Until today it does, but I eventually take it as a joke. I don't want to look like a unique guy who doesn't fear anything. But it is the truth. Living with this issue for such a long time has severely damaged my mental health. I have noticed, and my family has told me too, over time I have changed dramatically. I literally do not fear almost anything. I can be scared, but not afraid. I have evolved into a more resilient and occasionally aloof person. Previously, the appearance of this shadow would have filled me with fear, but now it no longer evokes such feelings. The last time I saw her, I got up from a chair and went back to see my patio at night. As soon as I turned around, I saw a shadow stop, looking into my eyes. I looked at him, let out a little laugh, and said, "I had not seen you for a while, where were you?" Said by many friends, family, and myself, living with this has spent me a lot mentally. Many have come to tell me that I have developed an attitude of a psychopath. With the passage of time, we have become accustomed to each other. There are anecdotes that I have not told, like that my cat has seen that shadow several times. And on one occasion he stuck with my little brother and was doing him bad for a while until we cured him. The thing at the window. This is a true story. I know many people say that, but this is from my own personal experiences. Everything I'm about to say is true. My mom, grandma, and I moved to this house when I was in 4th grade. It's not a nice house in a nice area. The outside brick is green in places, and the base of the house is crumbling away and rotten. Inside there was mold, and the roof leaked in places. The thing that I didn't like the most was how I felt when I was standing outside, like I was being watched. What happened next was a series of unforgettable events that will stay with me forever. It was during the day. I was sitting in bed after school, pretending to do homework as I watched cartoons on the TV. I remember I was watching Cyberchase. At this time, I had a small flat screen. My room was set up as follows: my bed was under my large window, and my TV was across from my bed, facing my window. Suddenly my TV started flickering weird, broken visuals and then shut off completely, and as I was going to stand up to investigate what happened, I noticed a reflection in the now black screen. It was a shape behind me in the window. My home is 1 story, so immediately I froze, fearing someone was watching me in my backyard. The figure wasn't very tall, only standing at about half of my window. I couldn't make out any features, my thin curtains hiding them away from me, but I knew from where they were standing they could see me very clearly. I was mid-standing, so my body was at a weird angle as I stood frozen, staring at the shape in my window, unmoving. I don't know how long I stood there, but it was enough time to make my legs start to ache. Finally, the figure turned to their side and walked away. I felt like I'd lost all blood in my face. I still stood there for a few more minutes before getting the courage to crawl on my bed and look out my window. Thankfully, I didn't see anything back there. Since that day, I have become paranoid, obsessively wondering if I will see the shape in my window again. Then, that fear seeped into my dreams. It wasn't every night, but at least once a month I would have a dream about lying in my bed at night, and when I looked out my window, I'd see a shadowy shape in it. The first time I had that dream, I froze. I couldn't move or do anything out of fear, but eventually when I had that dream, I'd get up on my knees on the bed, the shape outside following me so it was facing me at eye level through my thin curtain. Then I mustered the courage to swiftly open the curtain, only to find it empty. Suddenly it would be daytime in the dream, and everything was okay, and I'd wake up the next morning exhausted. Then, things started happening when I was awake again. When I was about 13, the tapping started. 3 slow and steady taps at my window, then 3 more taps. I tried to shrug it off as some branch tapping on my window in the wind. A few days after it started, when I was jumping on my trampoline in my backyard, I stared at my window, wondering if what I experienced so far was real or I'm just crazy. Then I realized there was no bush or trees near my window. There was absolutely nothing that could have been tapping my window. I felt fear take me over, feeling like I was suddenly being watched. I hopped off my trampoline and ran inside. That night, the tapping came back. This time, rather than nails tapping on the window, it sounded like someone's knuckle rapping on the window. At this point, I had kind of gotten used to it, whether the being on the other side of the window was real or imaginary. This time, like in my dream, I got up on my knees on my bed, facing the window. Unsure if the being outside had moved with me to be eye level with me from outside like in my dream. I slowly pulled the curtain to the side. I gazed out into the black void of the night. The nightlight in my room illuminated everything inside, making it difficult to see outside the window. I had no idea if there was someone staring back at me. My heart started pounding, but I didn't want to show I was afraid, so I stayed there, staring. The tapping had stopped as I stared out the window. Eventually, I decided I had stared enough and closed my curtain back and lay down in bed, somehow finding the will to fall asleep. The tapping would continue for years, but I had learned to just ignore it since that night. Then, something new started. One night during the tapping, I thought I heard the click of a camera. I tried to shrug it off, but nearly every day I'd start to hear the camera go off just beyond the wall. It started to scare me. Had the being started to take pictures? Was there even anything there? Then, I saw a flash as I was looking out the window, my fear apparent on my face, and at the same time heard the click of the camera. I tried to act calm as I got out of bed, walking out of the room and closing the door. It was early enough that my mom was still awake, and she didn't question when I came into her room wanting to hang out. I still had never spoken about this to anyone. Thereafter, it was another couple of years before anything else happened. But I started noticing a buzzing sound. It started happening at the same time every day, around 3 p.m., a loud buzzing. I couldn't figure out where it was coming from for the life of me. My uncle was living with us at this time, and he liked to take his phone calls out in the backyard for privacy reasons. One day he burst into the house after taking a call outside and told me and my mom that he saw a drone hovering outside my window. My heart dropped. That proved that something was real and tangible. Someone else had seen something. And that made the past year's memories feel validated. The visitor had upped their game. My mother did nothing about it, and neither did I. What could we do? The police wouldn't do anything because no crime had technically been committed that could be proven. I continued to hear the buzzing outside my window. One day it stopped, though, and again for a while I was without another peep. But of course, this thing doesn't want to give up. I finally decided to get a desk, needing one for college work, so I got a tall one that had a lot of storage. I had moved my bed out from under my window, now placing it against an adjoining wall, placing my desk in front of my window. One day I came home, everything in its place but two. I searched for my favorite shirt for a while but could never find it. Figuring it was just somehow somewhere I couldn't find it. But then I went to grab socks out of my sock bucket, which was just a plastic bin of socks haphazardly thrown in, but what I found wasn't just crumpled socks. On top of my socks was a single sock, neatly placed over mine. It was a black sock with dark gray toes and heel. All of my socks were short, only black socks. I grabbed it and asked my mom and grandma if it was theirs, but I knew they both only wore white socks. It was scary to imagine that someone had come into my room, not only to steal my clothes but also to leave something behind. Like a creepy gift. I decided to just throw it away. The way my desk is set, a sliver of the window peeks out the right side, directly looking over my bed. My window opens right to left and sadly has no lock on it. So as I lay in bed, I'd stare at that sliver, waiting for something to happen, but it never did. At least when I was looking. One day, after I'd calmed down and stopped staring at my window, I looked over and noticed my curtain was open. For some reason, I wasn't scared. It was during the day, so I could see nothing was there. But I knew that someone had opened my curtain from outside. That corner of my room was hard to get to, you'd have to climb over my bed to get to it, so I know it wasn't my mom or grandma, and it definitely wasn't me. I left it open for a couple of months, wondering if anything would happen, but it never did. But I could still feel eyes on me at night. Then one day I looked over and my curtain was closed. And since then nothing has happened, but I still wait for the tapping some nights. To this day, I have no idea who the figure was outside my window or if they'll return. I grew up in a haunted house and haven't shared my story with anyone in 30 years. I was your typical kid growing up in a lower middle class household. We had a decent, older house in the suburbs, and mom and dad were always working. This was the 80s, so my brother and I were often home alone or over at friends' houses. Our parents were often busy and unable to supervise us, which was common for the time. I remember knowing something was deeply wrong with our home as early as I could form memories or sense the world around me. I was afraid of ghosts and monsters under the bed or in my closet, like every other kid. You know, things that obviously weren't real and just some primal monkey brain remnant that kids work through as they get older. There was a distinct difference between these imagined monsters and the very real ones I would encounter over the next few years. My mother's father was still alive when all this started. He bought me a blue and white fighter jet, which I hung from the ceiling in my bedroom, above my bed. Sometimes wind would come in through the window and turn it a few spins counterclockwise, then it would spin clockwise and come back to rest and be still. I remember observing how it would eventually come to rest. It never spun much, but I liked to imagine it screaming through the sky and making shooting sounds. Shortly after I installed this thing, I would sometimes wake up in the middle of the night for no reason. I wasn't scared, or startled, or really awake for any reason. I would stare up at the ceiling trying to go back to sleep. Every once in a while, the jet would spin. And spin, and spin, faster and faster, until it was a blur, all in the same direction. The first time it happened, I thought it was weird. By the fifth or sixth time, this became a terrifying event. At other times, it would spin at a high speed and abruptly stop, as if someone had grabbed and held it in place. I have a memory of running out of my room screaming and crying over this. Grandpa died the next year. That jet meant more to me than it did before. I cherished this little treasure, but it was terrorizing me, and eventually I had to get rid of it. I was in first grade and walking to and from school with my friends. I had a house key, which wasn't unusual at the time. Downstairs we had a living room with a TV and couch. I remember coming home one of these days to watch cartoons. On my left side, there were slotted folding doors that hid the clothes washer and dryer. They always spooked me out for some reason, like there was someone in there sometimes sitting there just watching me. I never saw anyone or heard anything, but I could never shake that feeling. I'd often run by them. They were a source of fear for me, but I was already taking my clothes out and putting them away, so it wasn't alien or unusual. It just, very often, felt like someone was behind there just watching me. I think I was actually watching Pinwheel or something similar on TV. Maybe Lamb Chop. I don't know. But I remember sitting there once, and the left door folded open abruptly. Like someone tied a rope to it in a car outside, and the car just suddenly took off. They weren't on wheels or anything, so this scared the daylights out of me. I cried to my parents about it. I was being a baby, and it was nothing. Until it wasn't. One day, I was sitting there, and it opened and shut like this. Over and over, just slam, slam, slam. I wanted to run by to get out, but it wasn't safe because something kept slamming it open and slamming it shut. I almost want to say I heard laughter, but I didn't. I felt laughter. I was being terrorized. It stopped, and as I ran by, it started up again and scared the duck out of me. I slammed the door behind me and ran upstairs. Things calmed down for a few months. I'm in the 2nd grade, Mrs. Tubman's home room. I'm a big boy now. I don't get scared by ghosts that aren't real anymore. I'm helping my older brother with yard work and delivering newspapers. I'm quickly becoming fiercely independent at a young age. I get my own key and start walking home alone from school. We had a Raggedy Ann doll that sat on a rocking chair in one of the adjacent bedrooms. It always creeped me out, especially because it used to be in the attic, where I'd see it every time we got Christmas ornaments. For some reason my parents brought it down and set it downstairs on this rocking chair. I came home one day to watch cartoons. As I go to reach for the handle leading to the basement, the doorknob spins. Someone is on the other side holding it closed. Naturally it must be my brother. He got out earlier than me, of course he was playing a trick. I tried opening the door, but it wouldn't budge. It was unlocked, or the knob wouldn't turn. I pushed my shoulder into it because I knew I was stronger than him, but it still didn't open. I move back to get some speed behind me and go to shoulder it again, but the door slowly opens as I'm about to hit it. I fly through the open door and stumble into the room with that ducking doll instead. And to my abject horror, the rocking chair is moving back and forth. The doll is just a doll. It is as if a person is sitting there. I scream, run out of the room, and make it halfway up the stairs. I'm losing my mind. This isn't real. My parents told me it isn't real and made me go to a school counselor and coached me to swear it wasn't real. I'm brave. I deliver newspapers and do yard work. I'm a big boy, it is not real. I go back down and peek my head around the corner. The doll is now sitting facing me, with its back against the arm, and the chair is still rocking at the same mathematical, rhythmic, and predictable speed. It's just the wind, my parents had said, but the windows were closed. I lose my shit. I run out, making it up half of the stairs to the front door landing. I get up the other half of the stairs to the kitchen. I look around, nothing. No one is home. It is just me. I'm just freaking out. Mom convinced me I made these up and none of this is real. I try to pull myself together. We can't afford for them to come home early from work. I calm down, get my head straight, and pour a glass of water. That's when I hear the bang. Another bang. Another bang. Bang, bang, bang. It is the unmistakable sound of the attic door. You pull a cord, and the stairs fall out and down, and you climb the hole in the ceiling. Except you can slightly pull it to a certain length and let the cord go, and it will slam. I know exactly what it is and why it is making that noise, but I cannot believe it. I peek my head around the corner, and the rope is taut. It is straight down on the floor, like someone is pulling it. It is not swaying or dangling as the attic opens and slams. There is something invisible there pulling it and doing this on purpose. I lose my mind and run to the neighbor's house. I tell them, Mom and Dad come home early. I get in ducking trouble. I have to see another school counselor, Tim with the soft curly black hair. He is pleasant enough, but my parents tell me to tell him it's not real. I refuse. I see a Dr. Glickstein at some fancy office downtown. I tell him everything I've told you guys up to this point. I have to see him a few more times. Eventually, my mother convinces him I'm just making up stories. The terror campaigns continue for another year. It is mischievous, evil, persistent little things that crescendo into big things that become aggressive and threatening. Like it is just ducking with me. I'm 7 now, and I get really sick. I often feel extremely unwell. So sick another family member has to come over and watch me. I'm lying in bed with a window fan on, and I'm on the cusp of sleep. I'm praying to God and asking Grandpa for help, and I just can't do this anymore. I would rather have just been the kid in school who died. I see a little golden tornado thing come in from outside, through the window fan, and to my floor. It's in the corner of my eye, but I'm frozen in terror because, dear God, what now? But I suddenly feel peaceful. The corners of my sheet get tugged on, and I almost lose it, but I realize they're getting tucked into the side of the bed. I feel a warm, soft hand, like my grandfather's, press on the small of my back. I'm no longer terrified. I'm serene and at peace. I crack one eye open and see it is 1 a.m. Everything settles, and I'm calm, and not only do I feel better emotionally, but I even feel physically better. A refreshing, rejuvenating breeze comes into the room, and it carries me off to sleep. I wake up the next morning. My family member is frying eggs, and the house is the brightest it has been. It is like a Disney movie with animated birds outside singing, the food is fresh, the world is bright and new, my family member is happy, and even my brother is in good spirits. It seems like an entirely different world. We are eating breakfast, and I thank the family member for tucking me in so late last night. She says, "Well, that's strange. I went to bed after tucking you in, at 8 p.m., and slept through the night." This confused me for years. It took me some time to realize that after that night, I no longer experienced any harassment. No more slamming doors, weird dolls, slamming attics, or laundry room door harassment. Nothing. Gone just like it never existed at all. I'd go on to forget about this until 2015, when that family member died, and I guess again up until now. I still don't know what to make of it or how to feel about it. I'm sorry if it sounds wild, but I think there was some type of spiritual intervention that put an end to the haunting. I sometimes think Grandpa did me one last solid and came to help me. I'm not very religious, but I can't shake the feeling this is exactly what happened. I know it sounds wild, but I mean, what else could it really be? I inevitably burned that Raggedy Ann doll outside with my brother, who seemed to be the only one who ever believed me. At that point, it was emotional closure, not like destroying a spiritual vessel or cursed object. However, after that night, I never experienced anything similar again. I'd grow up to just be a normal person. I've never since had any auditory or visual hallucinations. I'm convinced to this day all of this was very real. I find it hard to believe any of this ever happened in my head despite what my parents and teachers said. I think some type of guardian spirit stepped in and put an end to it when I asked for help. I'm not sure there really is any other way to see this. Thank you for listening. More importantly, thank you for giving me a safe place to share. Gaslighting and ostracizing you over real events can only intensify the pain. Stay safe out there and never be afraid to ask for help. Growing up in a haunted house. From my earliest memory up to the age of 20, my family and I lived in a house that we swear is haunted. My sisters and I all have stories about encountering ghosts. I'm sure that our parents had such stories too, but sadly they're no longer with us to share them. I figured that I would at least share some of mine here. Story 1, 3 Ghosts in the Window. This happened when I was pretty young, I think maybe 8 years old. I was downstairs in the basement, playing with my Hot Wheels cars in the rec room. The first thing to know about that basement is that every time I walked down the stairs, I would always get this eerie feeling that I was being watched. I'm not the only one who feels that way. My sisters, and later my eldest nephew, all noticed it. Anyway, this particular day, it was late afternoon/early evening in the summer, so the sun was low in the sky, and sunlight streamed in through the basement windows, which look out onto the backyard. As I was playing, deliberately sitting in the patch of sunlight on the floor, I noticed the shadows of, what I assumed were, 3 people walking past the basement window. Being a curious child, I wondered who was in our backyard. So I got up, went over to the basement door, which leads to the carport, and went into the backyard to take a look. My backyard was empty. The backyard is huge. I could see them before they reached the other side of the house, as they were walking at a normal pace. I would have seen them turn the corner at the far end of my house if they had started running right after passing the window where they cast their shadow. It really creeped me out. Story 2, The Squeaky Floor. This happened to me when I was about 12 or 13 years old. First, I need to explain the house I grew up in. The floors on the main level squeaked terribly. Practically every square inch of the floor made a squeaking, creaking, or groaning sound when stepped on. What's more, each area of floor made a very distinct sound when stepped on, so that you could tell exactly where someone was inside the house by the sound that the floor made. Anyway, I was home alone this particular evening. I was sitting in the lazy boy armchair in the living room, with one of the leaves from the dining room table across the armrest to use as a table, doing my homework. As I was working, I heard the sound of someone coming out of my parents' bedroom and beginning to walk down the hall towards me. I stopped what I was doing, turned around, and looked down the hall to see who was there, and the hallway was empty. The moment I turned to look down the hall, the sound stopped. I shrugged it off and went back to work when, minutes later, the floor started squeaking again. Whatever was making the sound got right in front of the bathroom door when I turned to look again, and the sound stopped. I sat there, staring, silently daring the entity to continue making noise while I watched. Not a sound came down the hall, so I went back to doing my homework. A few minutes later, the squeaking began again. I waited for the sounds to reach the top of the stairs, right in front of the kitchen door. Then, I turned around and stared again. Once again, the sound stopped. I turned back to my homework, and a moment later I heard the floors squeaking their way into the kitchen. It was at that point that I said, "Screw it." I set my homework aside, turned on the TV, and started watching Guns of Paradise starring Lee Horsley. Story 3, Tea Time. This is a relatively short story, but a pretty creepy one. I like drinking tea. I drink a lot of tea. I far prefer drinking tea over drinking coffee. Anyway, one cold winter day I was sitting at home, enjoying a cup of Earl Grey tea, and watching the snow fall past the streetlights from the living room window. Suddenly I heard a really loud bang in the kitchen, as though someone had slammed the cupboard doors really hard. I jumped and spilled tea on my shirt. I got up and went into the kitchen to see what the racket was. The cupboard doors where we kept the coffee mugs and dishes were sitting partially open, as if someone had slammed them really hard and they bounced back open. Here's the thing, though. When I had fixed my cup of tea, I had left the cupboard doors closed. Also, all the kitchen windows were shut, so the wind is unlikely. The cupboard doors had opened themselves, slammed themselves shut with enough force to bounce back partially open, and they stayed there. Creepy. Story 4, Just Saying Goodbye. This incident occurred when I was 20 years old. It was the night before I was moving away to go to college. My mom, my best friend, and I were all standing around the living room, just talking. Suddenly, the TV turned on all by itself. It stayed on for maybe a minute, and then it shut itself off. I looked around and saw that the TV remote control was lying on the coffee table, and not one of us was anywhere near close enough to it to have hit the power button, deliberately or by accident. I just laughed and said, "I guess the ghost is saying goodbye in his own way. I'll miss you too, Casper." I knew it was the ghost and not just a glitch in the TV because it was too new to have glitches like that. I heard a voice in my basement and cannot explain it to save my life. So for reference, if it matters, I don't believe in anything supernatural, paranormal, or whatever you want to call it. I have very pragmatic views of the world and reality as a whole. I'm not religious, I'm not superstitious, etc. with that out of the way. So I moved my desk down to the basement because it's hotter out now, and it's easier and cheaper to cool that area and be comfortable. My basement's kind of dank and unfurnished, but I've always been perfectly comfortable there. I've never really felt scared or anything. I still don't really believe in any of this. But tonight, actually a few minutes ago, really shook me. So I'm on my computer talking to a buddy of mine via Discord. We tend to share screens and webcams as well. We began this practice during the COVID pandemic as a way to add a little extra connection, and it quickly became a habit. Now it's just habit. As we converse, I can clearly hear a voice in one of the rooms next to me. I don't remember exactly what was said, but I'm certain I heard a voice. To the point that I thought it was an intruder of some sort. Honestly, I was ready to fight someone. I immediately paused the convo, and my buddy got pretty worried, since I'm normally not a very alert person. I told him to give me 1 second, and I heard someone talking in a room over. He said he heard something through my mic as well, and I told him to just give me a bit and, if anything goes stupid, call the cops. So I left my mic on and got up to go check. I had a broom that I grabbed to use as an improvised whacking stick, one of the expansive ones, in case it got physical. Again, my basement's unfurnished and pretty messy because I've been trying to do just that, furnish it. In fact, I just finished insulating yesterday and am now moving on to drywall. I tripped over something, dropped an F-bomb, and could clearly hear my buddy through my speakers asking if I was good. I yelled back, "Yeah, I'm fine." I have a pair of Logitech speakers that I had him coming through so I could actually hear him through most, if not all, of the basement. It only takes me a minute or two to do a solid scan of everything, and no one's there, of course. Otherwise I wouldn't be here, right? And they couldn't have left if they were there. The door in my basement closes incredibly slowly and makes a butt-ton of noise if you try to force it to close faster. However, it was fully closed and even locked. So, odd, but that happens. In my head I say a bird probably chirped a certain way, and mid-conversation I just heard a voice instead. It's not a big deal, it's easy to explain, and it also makes sense. Let's return to our conversation. On my way back, I heard him inquire whether I liked Final Fantasy VIII, to which I responded, "That's a bit random, but alright. While it may be a controversial opinion, I did not enjoy it. I found the combat to be overly complicated and frustrating. 9 was awesome, though. At this point I'm sitting back down at my desk, my mind has chilled out. So at this point is where it all really got under my skin, and I'm lying in bed right now typing all this, still processing. He says to me, "Tell your sister I said hi, by the way. We've known each other for a while, and though we've only spoken through games and Discord, we're pretty close and are familiar with each other's family, etc." I tell him, yeah, next time I see her, sure. And I make a joke about how my sister is a lesbian, and he has no chance with her no matter how hard he tries. He playfully says STFU and kind of yells through my speakers, hoping she would hear, saying hi and whatnot. At this point I'm really confused and tell him my sister isn't even over right now. I'm alone at my house. Plus it's 1 a.m. Why would I have anyone over anyways? So now he's also confused and says he heard me talking to her and to stop being annoying about it. He said we were talking about a 3D print I was working on and that my sister said she thinks it would print better if I printed it on its side instead. I tell him he must have been listening to something online. Or, I don't even know because she's not here, and the only thing I said while I was away from my desk was to answer his random question about Final Fantasy VIII. He said he never asked that at all. And that once he heard me talking to my sister, he went off alert mode since he assumed the voice I heard was my sister's. At this point I go from confused to a little annoyed. I tell him to stop, since he's not going to freak me out. It's my basement, I live here, and I'm 100% comfortable in this space. In fact, I've slept down here before. I walk around in my basement all the time in the pitch dark, and it doesn't bother me. I don't believe in ghosts. Etc., etc. He says essentially the same, however, that I'm not going to be able to scare him because why would he care anyways? So now we're basically the equivalent of that meme where Spider-Man is pointing at other Spider-Men. You can't fool me, no you can't fool me, and so on. Eventually I ask if he heard anything I said about Final Fantasy VIII, and he says, "No, dude, I told you I was just chilling, waiting for you to get back after you found out it was just your sister." At this point I tell him that I'm not intending to try and create some ghost story or whatever, but that my sister isn't here. 100%, she was here earlier to grab some tomato starts for her and her girlfriend's garden, but even when she was here we didn't talk about any 3D prints. And my heart sank when I said that. I asked him how he knew I had a 3D printer. I bought one a few weeks ago, it's pretty sick, BTW, but I haven't spoken to him or any of my friends about it yet. Life's just been busy. He said that he only brought it up because he heard me and my sister talking about it in the background. At this point I grab my phone and switch Discord over to it so I can use the camera on that. I take him around the basement and go upstairs. Go around the house. Then go to the parking spots and show him it's just my car. Eventually this boils down to me calling my sister on Discord on my phone. Thankfully she answers, but she's in bed with her GF with bed hair and all, asking why in the world I'm calling her this late. She says hi to our friend, and he's freaking out now. I essentially tell her not to worry about it, I just wanted to make sure she's okay, and I'll explain later. I'm assuming she went back to bed. But yeah. That all just happened. We sat there for a bit, and I told him, I think that's a good sign to hang it up for the night. Good night and sleep well, etc. So I sat there at my desk for probably 5 to 10 minutes just trying to figure out WTF just happened. The voice being a bird chirping. Sure, that's believable to me. But how did my friend know I had a 3D printer? He couldn't have. My sister doesn't really talk to that group of friends, although everyone kind of knows each other. Plus, she wouldn't have the patience to try and mess with me like that. Also, she was definitely asleep when I called her, so that pretty much rules tomfoolery on her end out. And her girlfriend is really shy and doesn't talk to anyone at all, really, and frankly, she's not the brightest either. I'd believe it was the ghost of Nicki Minaj before I believe she came up with a prank like this. So honestly, I'd bet money it wasn't her either. And that's not even including the part where I definitely heard my friend ask about FF8. Just as if it was coming through my speakers. And I know that Mike can pick me up from other rooms if I speak up. Hell, I've left my desk to take a piss before and was able to continue conversations by just speaking a bit louder. I'm of sound mind, I know I am. But right now I genuinely feel as though I'm going crazy. I expressed this to my friend and told him that now's not a good time, I have a lot of background stress going on, and if he is trying to mess with me, it was funny, I'll take the joke to the chin, but please stop. I've never been this way with him, and he was caught off guard a bit. He promised me 100% he isn't messing with me and that now he's kind of scared too. And honestly I believe him, and I hate that. I want to believe it's him and my sister messing with me, but why? Why out of the blue do that? Like I said, they're not really friends, more so just friendly, and it would be so out of left field for either of them to do anything like that, let alone in tandem. We're all adults that work and have stresses and are tired most of the time, it's why we only talk rarely these days. Who has time or energy to do something that elaborate? And why would one of my best friends take what little time we had to catch up and waste it trying to spook me? Especially knowing this guy and I are fairly sentimental and put a lot of weight on our friendships and whatnot. Like, it's just not adding up. But I heard a voice, for sure, I heard a voice. And I heard him ask about FF8, and I believe that he heard me talking to my sister. I just can't fill in the blanks of how that could have happened. I tend to read people pretty well, and all I can say is I don't get the vibe that anyone here is lying. So that leads me here. I really just want someone to tell me I'm not going crazy. I don't know what to feel right now, because that was all so real and so unreal at the same time. I just reread everything to make sure I didn't misspell stuff or something, and now I'm thinking about setting up cameras or something. I still feel like I'm going crazy. But yeah, that's it.